Coming home. Dowd. Beloved. 6. Lamb. Speaking for himself. The 22nd Mizmowr/Psalm has been translated early and often for numerous volumes presented under the YAHOWAH brand because of its vivid eyewitness depiction of Passover's fulfillment in 33 CE. It was initially retranslated as part of the concluding chapter of the previous volume of Coming Home, Chag Matsah, in my quest to better understand why Dowd's testimony regarding the fulfillment of Pesach was written in first person. But then I removed it, placing it here, because I wanted to establish a more comprehensive foundation for the Zoroa's self-assessment. And subsequently, based upon what we have discovered, a review of the 22nd Mizmowr now appears in Yada Yahowah Volumes 4 and 7, YYV Invitations and Shana Years. It is also now in Twistianity, Volume 5, Philology Imposter. Needless to say, we have learned a great deal and have grown in our relationship with YAHOWAH. And as part of this growth in understanding, we have come to appreciate and acknowledge Dowd's desire to fulfill the YYV and subsequent actions to do so. And now, as we strive to properly present the life and lyrics of the Messiah and Son of God, it is time to return to his eyewitness portrayal of Pesach's fulfillment in year 4000 YAH. His excruciatingly graphic and copiously detailed, first-person account of what the Passover lamb endured was written by the man who endured it. I want to give our king his due by properly conveying the lyrics of the Messiah and Son of God as he described the events of the 14th of Abib in year 4000 YAH. As we proceed, we find that the dedication of Psalm 22 includes a unique variation of a common word, al, which was written ilf. And since oath would create the plural of il, my assessment based upon what we have recently discovered is that Dowd intends for us to consider how each definition of il applies during the fulfillment of Pesach. Dowd David wrote. To the glorious director and everlasting guide, YAHOWAH, concerning the approach of the brilliant conductor and preeminent orchestrator who is enduring and magnificent, according to the leadership of the lamb opening the doorway, leaping like the buck, al-th, the plural of il, ram or male lamb, the leader who governs, the door jamb or doorposts, a buck or stag, and one who is sufficiently strong, healthy, and vigorous to protect the flock, of the dawn, hashakar, of the sunrise at daybreak. A song, Mizmowr, a psalm with lyrics set to a melody, of, La, Dowd, the beloved. Mizmowr/lyrics of a song/Psalm 22 dedication. It is marvelously befitting what follows. Dowd would represent all of these things on this day and those that would follow. The Lamb of God who opened Passover's door prophetically revealed that he would say, my God, Eli, why, lama, for what reason, for how long, and to what end, have you in this moment forsaken me, as of any, have you, even for this finite time, abandoned and relinquished me, have you left me during this period and are now separated from me, having departed from me, releasing me and thus damning and deserting me, cal perfect second person masculine singular. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 1 in part. Dowd was among the most prolific prophets and wrote these words 1,000 years prior to fulfilling them. He had volunteered for this mission. He knew why. This question was rendered for our benefit. Asab speaks of separation, of abandonment and damnation. So, when his distancing is from God, we know that Dowd's nepesh was isolated and prepared for its impending journey to Sheol. Therefore, and profoundly important in this case, Asab was scribed in the Kal stem and perfect conjugation. The separation would be genuine, albeit for a finite period of time. This means that Dowd would transition from fulfilling Pesach on Moriah to enduring Matzah in Sheol before coming home to Shemaim on Bikurim before the dawn's early light. Since the torture of Passover would end, and the celebration of Bikurim would be just a day away, the period of damnation would be limited in time but not anguish. This distinction is particularly relevant because Dowd's nepesh had been inseparable from YAHOWAH in Shemaim for 1,000 years prior to this occurring. Keep in mind that Dowd is relating his own experience and talking about something that he would not endure for another 1,000 years. So, as he takes us on a tour of his future and our past, he will be drawing us in and out of the timeline as he recalls his perceptions of these monumental events that played out long after he wrote about them. Such is the nature of prophecy, especially when the prophet is revealing his own story. Before Pesach, Dowd's soul was resident in either a nondescript Basar body or a reconstituted version of his own through the use of his DNA. Either way, as a mangled mess, it would soon be discarded and then obliterated. A corporeal form was necessary to fulfill Pesach as the man was recast as the lamb, but it would have been counterproductive thereafter. A physical body cannot enter Sheol, just incorporeal souls and spirits, and come Bikurim, having mass would have precluded Dowd's soul from transitioning the dimensions and re-entering heaven. Prior to this life, Dowd had enjoyed the comfort, encouragement, perfecting nature, enlightenment, and support of his father in Shemaim. Then, accompanied by the Ruach Kodesh set-apart spirit during his brief stay on earth, his association with God would have remained up close and personal. She would be his constant companion during this life as she had been during his previous one 1,000 years earlier. Therefore, with her now serving as a transport mechanism rather than protector and supporter, even if only briefly, there would have been a massive void. Regarding the body he was using, parting with it would be good riddance. It was now a gory mess. The Romans had ripped the skin off of his tendons and bones with their whips and now were anguishing it further by nailing it to a pole. What was left of the Basar was nearly dead, and having served its purpose, it would soon be incinerated in accordance with the Torah's instructions, never to be seen in this form again. Far, Rachok, remote in distance and time, separated in space, alienated and no longer in a state of close association, from Rachak, meaning to be removed and distant, to be sent off and to go far, away from, min, out of and separated from, my liberation and deliverance, Yeshua any, my rescue and salvation, but especially my freedom, are the words, dabri, are the spoken and written statements, messages, communication, records, and accounts, of my anguished groaning, shaga any, of My roaring moan as a lion, my guttural cries in torment. By alluding to the roar of a lion, Dowd is equating himself to the Lion of Yehudah. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 1, every verse is one number advanced in the JPS Tanakh to accommodate the long introduction, making this 22:2. The realization that Dowd's soul had a long way to go to accomplish the mission is particularly relevant. Pesach is just the beginning, the first of 3 successive YYV. And the most visible, Passover isn't actually the most important step in his or our journey to God. That occurs on Matzah when our souls are perfected by the removal of our guilt because Dowd would carry it to Sheol. There is a common mistake made by Jews who believe that Passover is the main event, and that Matzah is just something to eat during it. This errant perception is advanced in Ezekiel, where Passover is the only mikra Satan wants to pervert and then maintain. It is within his autobiographical account that Matzah, rather than a mode, is simply an ingredient, thereby supporting the rabbis while defeating God's intent. God calls this time Chag Matsah. Accordingly, Passover is the doorway to unyeasted bread leading to firstborn children. And, therefore, from Dowd's position during Pesach, the main event still lay before him. When speaking to puzzled Jews about this realization, I ask them, what happened among Yisraelites during the first observance of Pesach? They will claim liberation, but the answer is, nothing. They ate a lovely dinner and went to bed. They were freed from Mitzrayim on Matzah as they passed into the Sinai. And, therefore, while their lives were spared by Pesach when others around them lost theirs, they walked away from religious and political corruption during unyeasted bread. And once free, they became the children of Yisrael as they were symbolically reborn when emerging from the sea on their way to the promised land as a family. However, while Yahuwah would take the Yisraelites out of Egypt, he was not about to remove the Egyptian influence from them without their permission, which they never offered. And so, to resolve this problem, Dowd carried Yisrael's legacy of rebelling against Yahuwah with him into Sheol where their collective guilt would remain. Also worth noting, time would flow differently for Dowd's soul in Sheol during Matzah. If hell is the equivalent of a black hole, then 24 hours on earth may have passed from his perspective in a matter of seconds due to the relative mass. But since Sheol was designed to incarcerate souls forever, it may have seemed like an eternity. And while Dowd surely knows, the concept of relativity, of time flowing at different rates relative to the observer's proximity to mass or velocity, was so far beyond the vocabulary of the day, and of his people's need to know, that we can only speculate in this regard. My God, Elohim Eni, I am appointed to call out and continually proclaim the summons and to make the invitations known. Kara, I am mentioned and named when reading and reciting the offers to meet and be welcomed. Kal in perfect first person singular, this day, Yomam, during this day, but, Wa, you do not answer, Lo, Anna, you do not reply or respond, Kal in perfect, so, Wa, by night, Layla. In the absence of the light in the darkness, there is no relief for me, no expectation of rest or silence, Wa lo, Dumyala, Eni, there is no cessation of noise for me, or the expectation of anything right, from Dama, to cease as a result of being cut off from Yah. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 2. Dowd is announcing that he was on Mount Moriah in the city of Dowd during the 80th Yobel year to fulfill the YYV. He wanted his invitation delivered so that his sacrifice would not be in vain. Finally, at long last, mission accomplished. I have long speculated whether, prior to Dowd volunteering, Yahuwah's original plan to fulfill Pesach and Matzah would have been to deploy his own nepesh. This way, he would have endured the consequence and penalty of our guilt by carrying it into Sheol. And while he may have engineered a way to prevail, this approach would have been tremendously awkward. It is inconceivable that God would allow Romans, whom he despised, to torture him. And if he intended to be the lamb, why did he tell Abraham that he would provide the lamb for the sacrifice rather than serve as the sacrifice? And who incinerates the basar the nepesh occupied, if the nepesh is Yahuwah? But then it really gets messy because Yahuwah cannot be associated with our guilt, which is the whole purpose of Dowd carrying it away and depositing it in Sheol. Further, Yahuwah cannot go to the place of separation from himself. Even stranger, come Bikurim firstborn children, how does Yahuwah's nepesh play the role of his son? Even beyond this litany of impossibilities, had God fulfilled Passover and unyeasted bread, by doing so alone, he would have acted out of character. There would no longer be a justification for Moses, Dowd, or Yada if Yahuwah was willing to work alone to achieve his goals. Further, God would have deprived his beloved son of the opportunity to earn the respect he needed to guide Yisrael into the future. Therefore, Yahuwah facilitated Dowd's desire by not responding to withdraw him. He would do so, but not until the conclusion of Matzah. The full day and night of separation would not only isolate Dowd's soul, but during this time there could be no communication between father and son. It is interesting to note that there is no noise in space. This is because there is no medium for the waves to promulgate, as does sound through the air. But within the extreme density of a black hole, the noise would be oppressive as the fabric of the material realm is pulverized. It would have been anguishing. When allowing his soul to enter Sheol, Dowd had to implicitly trust Yahuwah to an extent we can only imagine. No soul had ever been allowed to escape. His would be the first and last. Of course, the good news for us is that when Dowd carried his people's guilt with him into Sheol, leaving it there, our souls were unleavened. The pervasive fungus of religion and politics was forever expunged. In this way, the covenant's children are perfected, preparing us for adoption during Bikurim. This is what Matzah accomplishes, and it explains why it is so essential for those who want to live with God. The Hebrew word translated night, Lael, actually defines Sheol as the adversity of being away from light. There would be no rest as his soul descended into the darkness, the one place God himself could not go. This is why I was so critical of Solomon when he claimed that Yahuwah would continually dwell in darkness. Incarcerated in hell, Dowd's soul would suffer, after the body he had occupied was sacrificed during Pesach to open the door to life. However, suffering was ancillary to the purpose of unyeasted bread which exists to remove the fungus of religion and politics. Our guilt was carried into Sheol and deposited there, never to be seen again. Projecting his thoughts toward his father, and recognizing that they were now on opposite sides of the universe, Dowd reminisced. You are set apart, Yada Yahowah. You are separated and distinct, unique and uncommon, living to establish, Yashab, dwelling throughout time, intent on being the living embodiment and establishing a dwelling place, Cal participle, the renown and reputation, Tehillah, the adoration and excellent character, even the credibility in subsequent empowerment, from Halal, the brilliance, of Yisrael, individuals who persist and persevere, engage and endure, with God, freed and empowered by God. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 3. That is my point, Yahowah is set apart from all things perverted and common, and thus from religion. The fungus could not be borne by him. It was removed so that we could be set apart unto him. There is no better news or greater gift. When Dowd carried his people's guilt with him into Sheol, leaving it there, our souls were unleavened and, thus, perfected. In this way, the covenant's children are presentable for adoption during Bikurim. This is what Matzah facilitates, making it essential for those who want to live with God. Also relevant, Yahowah does not want to be worshipped or obeyed but, instead, as our Father, he wants to re-establish the reputation of his family, Yisrael. That is an amazing insight into his character and purpose. This remains his prime objective. Even before we realized that this was Dowd fulfilling Chag Matsah, this statement was devastating for Christianity, because it means that the Passover lamb was not enduring this sacrifice on behalf of a Gentile church or Christians. This son knew what he was talking about in this regard. In you, Ata, our fathers, of Anaknu, relied, Batach, they trusted, at least for a while, and they were totally confident and genuinely secure, Cal perfect. They trusted, Batach, genuinely relied for a time, placing their confidence in, Cal perfect, and, you continually rescued them, Palat Hem, you brought them away from danger to a safe place, delivering them, helping them escape and survive, Peel imperfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 4. The king was serving his people. After uniting and defending Yisrael in his first life, he would restore them to fellowship by making them perfect and immortal children of God in his second life. And in this way, Yahowah is consistent. When we rely, he delivers. Unfortunately, it has been a long time since Yisrael cried out to Yahowah. And yet, on this side of the Exodus and with the Torah before us, the first step home begins by summoning Yahowah by name. This, however, was not an academic exercise for the Messiah. He was going to be imprisoned within the most extreme manifestation of Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression. As the plural, contraction of my to consider the implications of Tzara being confined and anguished, Yahowah's liberation of the children of Yisrael enslaved in Mitzrayim serves to foreshadow what God would do for his son. So, in his plea, Dowd is identifying with Yisrael at the most magnificent moment in their long history. To you, Ada, to you, they cried out for help, Zaaq, they called for assistance and they summoned, Cal perfect, and they were delivered, Malat, they were spared, saved, and rescued, Niphal perfect. In you, Ada, with you, they trusted and relied, Batach, they placed their complete confidence, Cal perfect, and they were not disappointed or disapproved, Lo Bausch, they did not suffer emotional or physical distress or despair because they were not considered wrong or mistaken and they were no longer ashamed, Cal perfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 5. As mentioned, Dowd's declaration goes way back, all the way to the Yatzah, Exodus. He was putting his sacrifice in the context of history, his people's experience when Yahowah delivered and saved them from religious and political oppression and slavery. The lesson is twofold. First, Yahowah came with Moses to deliver the children of Yisrael from the torment of civilization, from being abused and worked to death by an authoritarian religious and political regime. And while their lives were spared on Pesach, they were liberated from the controlling influence of Egypt during Matzah. Second, their preferential circumstance would be short-lived. And that is made evident by the perfect conjugation. The Yisraelites had, unfortunately, bonded with their captors and took their preference for false gods with them. In that these are Dowd's thoughts as he was completing his service as the Pesach Ale, each word should be understood in the context of Passover. The mode was and remains the doorway through which we can escape the deadly consequence of religious and political corruption. On the other side is the promised land. Passover is the portal to a new life, one that is perfect and eternal. Those allowed to pass through it en route to unyeasted bread are never disappointed. While Dowd volunteered, for it to matter, Yahowah would have to allow his son's soul to be separated in our stead in the process of carrying our guilt away. While we do not fully understand the mechanics of how he was able to carry the evidence against us with him to deposit it in Sheol, we do not need to know how it happened to appreciate why it occurred, or to benefit from it. Since this was written by Dowd to describe what he endured on our behalf, let's acknowledge something that is vitally important. By misappropriating the promises and accolades Yahowah afforded him and transferring them to the counterfeit, Jesus Christ, Christians do Father, Son, as well as Yisrael, a grave injustice. God is made out to be a liar, we lose sight of Dowd's heroics, and we devalue all Yah sought to accomplish through his beloved Son. This psalm exists to explain how, why, when, and by and for whom the Passover sacrifice was made manifest. And let's be clear, this was tremendously painful. Mizmowr/Psalm 22 will go on to detail the most torturous elements of Dowd's suffering. It was at the end of a long day. Our king had been through the pretense of a trial, spit upon, beaten, and whipped by the Romans who had invaded and were now occupying his country. The body that God's Ruach and his nepesh occupied had suffered and bled beyond our comprehension. Inhumanely designed Roman flagella ripped away the soft tissues from his vulnerable back and legs. Then this beastly empire nailed what was left of the lamb to a post and beam to die an excruciating and humiliating death. And therefore, I am but, Enki, with regard to the speaker in this discussion, I now exist as, a crimson grub, Tola, a bloodied worm and scarlet pulp, Coccus ilices from which red dye is extracted, no longer extant or present as a person, while lo, Aish, no longer a man or individual, i.e., I'm now less than human, Ysh is from an unused root meaning extant, rebuked and taunted, insulted and dishonored, chirpa, scorned and disgraced as contemptible, defied and railed against, insulted with slurs, by humankind, Adam, mankind, specifically the descendants of Adam, and disrespected and demeaned, Baza, disregarded, held in contempt, and ridiculed, seen as worthless, lightly regarded, and of little value, by the family, by the people who are kin and nation of Yisrael. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 6. This statement is exceedingly important for a number of reasons. The reference to the Tola bloodied worm is both prophetic and telling. The Romans, like the Roman Catholic Church after them, were sadistic in their development and deployment of the most excruciating ways to torture and kill. Having been under their control, the body that Dowd's nepesh still occupied was so abused, it no longer appeared human. This is something God will never forget. Be assured, he will hold the leadership of Imperial Rome accountable, as well as the Roman Catholic Church because they would develop and popularize a conspiracy to blame Jews for what they, themselves, had done. Additionally, this not only reveals that this body was disposable, and being used to represent the sacrificial lamb, it makes the specter of a physical resurrection macabre. In this light, we should not focus on the appearance of the corporeal body that was bludgeoned but, instead, on the soul who endured the torment and survived it to tell us his story. Also revealing, Dowd's sacrifice was not only dishonored by the men torturing him, these Gentiles representing Rome, but he was also rejected by the people of Yisrael, his family whose respect he was there to earn. By comparison, their disregard would make the tumult of the waters of Meribah, something which still stains the collective Jewish soul, look like a minor disagreement. With all of the prophecies pointing to Dowd at this moment, there is no excuse for Yisrael getting this so wrong. And approaching 2,000 years later, they still haven't figured it out. And this is why YAHOWAH instructed Eliah, who will be performing as the priest while serving as the master of ceremonies for the Numbers 19 sacrifice of the Adam Apara bloody red heifer, to toss in a Tola crimson grub on top of the body before YAHOWAH ignites the fire. God wants his people to look back in time 3,000 years to when Dowd used this same unique term to describe the wreckage of his Basar body. Not only will the Basar body of his Basar herald be similarly bludgeoned on Teruah, YAHOWAH wants Yisrael to understand the connection between these men. Without Yada, they would not know YAHOWAH as Shem, understand the Berith, capitalize upon the micro-EY, or appreciate what Dowd had done to make these days matter. Further, Dowd was now serving as the worm of Jacob and, thus, of Israel. This was foretold by Yashayah Isaiah 300 years after Dowd wrote this Mizmowr. In Isaiah 41 verse 14, we read, "You should never be afraid, al-yar, you, singular, should not be anxious, kal imperfect second person feminine singular jussive, O worm, Tola, bloodied grub, feminine singular, of Yaakov Israel, Yaakov, serving as a synonym for Yisrael. People, Mathi, men, masculine plural, of Yisrael Israel, Yisrael, myself, am here to help and support, any Pazar, I, myself, will assist at this time, kal perfect first person singular, you, ADH, you, feminine singular, and thus addressing the Tola, prophetically announces, Naam, YAHOWAH, YAHOWAH. Your kinsman redeemer, Gal ADH, the one from the same family who pays the price to reacquire those of you who are stained and defiled and ransom you from the control of others, kal participle, is the set apart one, Kodesh, is the most uniquely qualified, respected, awe-inspiring, uncommon, and special, the essential, dedicated, and upright individual, of Yisrael individuals who engage and endure with God, Yisrael, Israel. Yashayah/Isaiah 41 verse 14. Dowd's Mizmowr and Yashayah's prophetic portrayals of our salvation are inseparable, especially when identifying Dowd as the sacrificial lamb and when presenting the set-apart one of Yisrael as the kinsman redeemer of his people. Dowd used 3 different words for man in his previous sentence. After accurately describing the condition and appearance of the flogged body, he said that it was no longer present as a person. Aish is also the term YAHOWAH used to describe his form when he visited with Abraham and then Jacob according to the patriarch. We were then told that the sacrificial victim was being accused by Adam, symbolic of the first man created in God's image. While symbolic of what humankind had become, particularly as demonstrated by the beast of Rome, this could also suggest that Dowd was assuming the guilt of each covenant member all the way back to Adam, and thus serving as a metaphor for taking on the sin of many. But more than this, the aspect of Adam which made him unique was his neshama conscience. And yet, it is man's inability to think that has caused so many to disregard the lamb's purpose. Beyond this, the use of Adam is indicative of the Adam Apara. The word conveys man, red, and ground, all of which are applicable when describing the red heifer. Also, means people and is often used in reference to Yisrael. A millennium before it actually occurred, YAHOWAH told us that the Messiah's offer of redemption would be disrespected by his own family, Yehudim. In this regard, Jews have long dishonored the sacrifice of the Passover lamb. They have even made a religion out of denying that it was accomplished. And now that we know who was serving on their behalf, it makes the rabbinical rejection all the more disappointing. Even today, the vast preponderance of people show no regard for Dowd's compassion or heroics. Not one person in a million acknowledges the association between the king and the fulfillment of Chag Matsah. And this is inexcusable since there are so many exacting prophecies revealing what would occur, most of which were recorded many centuries before Rome or crucifixion existed, demonstrating that they were prophetic. The Romans executed those they viewed as political rivals along popular roadways, usually naked because it was more humiliating. Like all despicable totalitarian regimes, the torment was designed to have a deterrent effect, evoking fear among eyewitnesses. More than this, civilizations like Rome serve as grotesque projections of gang mentality, because the larger the empire and more powerful the nation, the worse people within them behave. This insight explains why Dowd revealed that the bystanders were gawking at him, shaking their heads, and saying senseless things, mouths running faster than their brains. All of those who see me, kol araya any, all who gaze at me, who look upon me, they deride and mock me, speaking unintelligibly about me, disparaging me, lag la any, they speak incoherently about me, stammering disapproving ridicule while scoffing at me. They shoot off their mouths, pater ba safa, they open their mouths, flap their lips, and release an unchecked flow of all manner of things, while they shake their heads, muwa rosh, wavering from the very beginning. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 7. It has been this way from the beginning, and nothing has changed. The world over, everyone speaks unintelligibly about Dowd, the Son of God, and all he represents. He is, by a wide margin, the least understood and the most underappreciated man in history. It was one thing for the Roman invaders to mock him. They, and the church they inspired, never knew any better. They were and remain ignorant of Yahowah, his Torah, Berith, and YYV3C6. Stupid is as stupid does. They continue to be belligerent toward God, unintelligently stammering while slandering and deriding him and his son. To make matters worse, the Roman Catholic Church deliberately negated Dowd's sacrifice by misattributing his titles, such that he would not be credited for having provided the greatest gift ever offered. It is one thing to have made the sacrifice, but to have the world's most popular religion predicated upon attributing it to a crude counterfeit, to a misnomer and myth, is particularly egregious. Now that we are acknowledging that these psalms were written in first person because Dowd endured this ordeal for our benefit, I am convinced that this next pronouncement occurred as it was written. Dowd was immensely proud of his father's name, so much so it is apparent that he used the pseudonym Yahushua to depict what he and Yahowah would accomplish together. It would have been ideal, not only because Yahushua was Moses' successor and followed in his predecessor's footsteps, it means, Yahowah delivers. Dowd was so courageous and bold, there is no doubt that he would have told all who would listen what he was going to do, why it would occur, and who was going to make it possible. But his audience, like praying zombies, was too busy talking to listen. These are quotes from those mocking and demeaning the Passover lamb as he was fulfilling Pesach to open the doorway to life everlasting with Yahowah. You have chosen to be rolled away, removed, and sent away to Yahowah, Galo el Yahowah, you wanted to be taken to Yahowah, Cal imperative second person masculine. So, let's see if he wants to rescue him, Palat who, perhaps he will choose to have him escape and survive, rescuing him from this most unfavorable circumstance, with him choosing to deliver him, Peel imperfect Joseph. Let him choose to deliver and save him, Natsal who, maybe he will decide to spare him and defend him, Hyphal imperfect Joseph third person singular masculine. Surely, ky, he desires to be with him, Chafes ba who, he must want to be by him, he takes pleasure in and has a fondness for him, Cal perfect third person masculine singular, dot. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 8. The implications are earth-shattering. It is yet another nail in the coffin of Christianity and Judaism. The lone eyewitness account, the single credible presentation, the only inspired testimonial of the fulfillment of Pesach Passover reveals that those who were there had heard the Messiah tell them that he trusted and relied upon Yahowah. He knew that his soul would survive and be delivered from this ordeal, which is why he volunteered to do it. He realized that the purpose of Passover was to tangibly demonstrate Yahowah's desire to rescue and save us as his covenant family from our mortality because God wants to be with his children, now and forever. Dowd was simply the foremost among us. To have these numbskulls recorded saying these things means that Dowd spoke about his relationship with Yahowah. It reveals that he had made these declarations publicly, at least to the extent that those passing by could quote him. And yet, there isn't even the slightest hint of Yahowah's name, or how Yahowah intended to deliver the soul of the Pesach isle, in anything Christians or rabbis call scripture. Other than what is recorded in Mizmowr/Psalms 22 and 88 and in Yashayah/Isaiah 41 and 53, there are no other inspired or credible eyewitness accounts of Dowd's fulfillment of Yahowah's YYV3C6. Apart from these prophecies, we would know very little about how Matzah was fulfilled to unleaven our souls or even how Bikurim was celebrated as a result. Therefore, since this accounting reveals that the onlookers that day in Jerusalem said these things using these words, they did so. And there is no possibility whatsoever that they would have said any of this if they had not heard Dowd expressing it. This realization destroys the narratives claimed by the Christian New Testament and Talmud Yerushalmi. And since their story is entirely different, you can either believe them or you can trust Dowd. Do you prefer the musing of men without prophetic credentials or would you rather rely upon the testimony of someone irrefutably inspired by God? Should there be some confusion on this matter, the Talmud, both the Jerusalem and Babylonian editions, are strictly rabbinical affairs. They record rabbis debating what they want Jews to believe the Torah means, as if they are better communicators than God. And in this regard, they are completely clueless. Given all they had to work with to discern the truth, to call these men sages is to elevate dumb and dumber to Mensa status. That is not to suggest that, even when it is obvious, finding the truth is effortless. As I've admitted, while I had privately discussed the possibility that Dowd may have served to fulfill Chag Matsah, it wasn't until I understood his motivations that I was able to appreciate why Yahowah allowed him to do so in this heroic and compassionate fashion. And even then, before publicly acknowledging it, I had to test the validity of this conclusion against every prophecy pertaining to the fulfillment of the YYV3C6 to verify that they were consistent with what we were reading in the 1st through 30th Mizmowr. And that's the relatively easy part because the real work is in coming to know and accept what the Torah says about the mode YYV3C6 while developing an understanding of how the Nabi portray them in conjunction with Dowd. One must then weave what we learn in the Mizmowr into these discoveries to develop a complete picture. And along the way, those who come to embrace the truth must be willing to go where few dare tread, because to find the answer, we must first expose and condemn the fundamentals of Judaism and Christianity. Along the way, we also encounter some bumps in our path which must be addressed. One such obstacle is here in Psalm 22 verse 8. There was an abrupt change in voice from Dowd serving as a first-person narrator to him relating what he heard being said about him. Adding complexity, Dowd is being addressed directly in the first sentence as you, and then indirectly in the next three statements as he or him. Then there is also the challenge of the opening verb, galo, which means to roll away. It sounds awkward to our ears when reading it in this context. But that's fine since the dialogue attributed to idiots is not inspired and is only true in the sense that it accurately conveys what they stated. And it isn't as ill-fitting in Hebrew as it seems in English because to roll away would have been extrapolated to mean to be removed and, thus, freed. Moreover, in the native tongue, there are additional connotations that may have been intended. He would have been crucified before the Golgotha escarpment of Maria, which derives its name from the same verb. Additionally, galo is used to reveal that the collective guilt of Yisrael would be rolled away in this fashion. Further pertaining to Mizmowr 22:8, knowing the response of the onlookers is helpful because it not only reveals that they used Yahuwah's name in conjunction with Dowd serving as the Passover lamb, they also recognized that he had spoken of having a close and intimate relationship with Yahuwah. He had obviously spoken of doing what he knew Yahuwah wanted. As a result, they would have been aware that God's intent would be to rescue Dowd's soul, but not on this day. As we move on to address the following pronouncement, we are faced with yet another opportunity to think our way through the Messiah's lyrics. And this is because we have not been told, frankly because we do not need to know, how Yahuwah engineered the placement of Dowd's soul in this, now discarded body. So now returning to the role of first-person narrator, principal actor, and eyewitness, we find the Messiah trashing another Christian myth. Indeed, it is true by contrast that, you, Yada, speaking to Yahuwah, had me to gush forth and thrash about, in normal childbirth from, Jayak any min, brought me out through the normal pushing process only to wiggle around and fight through. The primary meaning of Jayak is surge, push, or burst forth as part of customary childbirth, making this a graphic depiction of breaking the water in the amniotic sac, causing the uterus to contract, and leading to pushing the baby out during delivery, cal participle, the womb, biten, the uterus in the abdomen, causing me to rely, batach any, causing me to place my confidence, hyphal participle, upon, al, my mother's breasts, shed any, my biological mother's mammary glands. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 9, 22:10 JPS Tanakh. By using Jayak min, this becomes a graphic depiction of natural childbirth, which is the opposite of a miraculous nativity. It describes the rupturing of the amniotic sac at the commencement of labor, known colloquially as the pregnant mother's water breaking, before the newborn child is pushed out of the womb during painful contractions. A mother must contract her womb to deliver her child in less than 24 hours after the Jayak min occurs for the newborn's safety and to prevent infection. Similarly, this newborn child was like all others, in that he had to rely upon his biological mother's breast milk to fight infection and survive. This is as ordinary as normal gets. Sorry, Twistians, with your Christmas pageantry, but you got the wrong guy and it didn't happen your way. Surprisingly, even with billions of examples to study, scientists still do not understand how a new soul is generated during conception. They cannot even describe its composition. We know that it exists, that all animals have one, that it has no mass and, thus, must be a form of energy, and that its arrival is the spark of life while its departure is coterminous with death. Therefore, based upon our inability to understand even the most fundamental aspects of a nepesh, we should not be surprised that Yahuwah didn't try to explain the process in Dowd's second coming. Furthermore, I think the previous line depicting natural childbirth was literal of Dowd's first life while serving only to denounce the fabled virgin birth of the counterfeit of his second life. There would have been no purpose for Dowd to return as a baby to endure Chag Matsah, just as he will not come back as a child when king. Other than to denounce the Christian Christmas fable, we are left to explain why Dowd would insert a reference to gushing forth and a mother's breasts as an ode to his Passover sacrifice and the brutality of crucifixion, especially since he found so little comfort in his mother that she is never mentioned by him. But we are now aware of another sacrifice, that of Dowd's Basar herald, one already acknowledged by the inclusion of the crimson grub, where copious amounts of water will gush forth providing new life for Yisrael. And that sacrificial animal, as a heifer, is best known for providing the nurturing milk children must rely upon to mature. This could be Yahuwah coming full circle with his king and herald, the great ram as a lamb and the rambunctious bull as a heifer, on Pesach in Towrah, in years 4,000–6,000 dying so that others might live. Since this is one of the most important songs ever scribed, I have to be careful not to take our attention away from its message while, at the same time, being thorough in explaining my king's more obscure references so that they are not lost on us. And in this regard, much of what I have just shared with you I learned as a result of studying the 27th Mizmowr. It is how we began this volume of Coming Home entitled Dowd Beloved. He explained. Yahuwah, Yahowah is my light, my illumination and enlightenment, or any, my freedom, deliverance, and salvation, Yasha any. So, whom should I respect and revere, min my yar? Yahuwah, is the protector and fortress, Ma'os, of my life, Che any. From whom should I fear, min my fatched? Mizmowr 27:1. By encroaching upon me, ba carib al any, immoral and ignorant countrymen, raa, seek to devour my person in message and consume my body in proclamations, la akal f basar any. My belittling adversaries, Zar any, and my enemies, Wa Oyeb any, they will stumble and bring injury and ruin, Hem Kashal, with their approach toward me, La any Hem. And they will fall, Wa Naphal. Mizmowr 27:2. Even with him being pitched and inclined against me, chana al any mashana, my heart and thinking, leb any, will not be anxious or apprehensive nor show any fear or respect, lo yar. Even if he is rising up and taking a stand against me, kyum al any, to battle and fight, milchama, against this, ba zoth, I will remain confident and reliant, any batach. Mizmowr 27:3. One thing, Ekad, I have asked, Sha'al, from Min, Eth, Yahowah, through this, Eth High, may I continually seek to learn about, Bakash, me dwelling, Yashab any, within the house and family, Ba Baith, of Yahowah, all of the days, Kol Yauman, of my life, Che any, to look upon, observe, and gaze into, Chaza Ba, the favorable acceptance and loveliness, Noam, of Yahowah, and to look at, inspect, and consider exploring, Bakar, in his sanctuary and home, Ba Hakel. Who? Mizmowr 27:4. For he will conceal me, ky soften any, in his shelter, Ba Saku. During the day, Ba Yaum, of destructive shepherds and harmful countrymen, Ra, he will conceal me, causing me to vanish, Sathar any, in the protection of his tent and tabernacle, Ba Sether Oholhu. With a sharp crag, Ba Tsur, he will lift me on high to increase my prominence, Rom any. Mizmowr 27:5, and then, Wa Ada, my stature will rise, Rosh any, above my opposition who are rancorous toward me, Al Oyeb any, on every side, surrounding me, Sabib any. I want the sacrifice prepared, Wazabak, in his radiant tent and tabernacle, Ba Hoholhu, with the sacrificial offerings killed and presented, Zebakim, during Teruah. I will choose to sing, Shyr, because I want to make music for the enjoyment, Wazammer, of Yahowah, La Yahowah. Mizmowr 27:6. Your desire is to listen, Shama, Yahowah, to my voice, Kaul, any, as I call out, reciting an invitation to meet, Kara. You have decided to favor and distinguish me, Wachan and any. Your will is to be preoccupied with me, to sing with me, to communicate through me, and to respond by providing me as an answer, Wa Anna any. Mizmowr 27:7. Regarding you, La Ada, my thoughts and judgment, Leb any, acknowledge, Amar, that you have chosen to call my presence into account, Bakash Pana any. Therefore, your appearance, Eth Pana Ada, Yahowah, I consistently seek, request, and inquire about, Bakash. Mizmowr 27:8. You will not conceal your presence from me for a prolonged period of time, Al Sathar Pana Adamin any. You are not inclined to spread out or elongate frustration, resentment, or a grievance, Al Nada Baf, with your coworker and associate, Ebaid Ada. You have been, Haya, my helper, my influential and powerful assistant, Ezra any. You will never abandon me, Al Nadash any, just as you will never reject or forsake me, Wa Al Azab any, O God, Elohi, of my deliverance, emancipation, and salvation, Yasha any. Mizmowr 27:9. It is true, Ky, my father, Ab any, and my mother, Wa any, had rejected and forsaken me, as of any, but, Wa, Yahowah, having taken me in, will always be with me, as af any. Mizmowr 27:10. You want to guide and teach me, Yara any, your way, Derek any, Yahowah. Your will is to reliably lead me, Wanacha any, by the upright and level, correct and straightforward, agreeable and elevated, Ba Mishor, route, Arich, on account of, Laman, my adversaries, Sour any. Mizmowr 27:11. You have decided not to give me over to, Al Nathan any Ba, the soul of my adversaries, who would diminish, belittle, constrain, and negate me, nepesh Zar any, who, indeed, will have risen up and become established to take a stand, Ky Kyum, against me, Ba any, to bear false witness, provide deceptive and misleading testimony and commit fraud, Ed Sheker. They exude, Wayafak, injustice and oppression, immorality and ignorance, wrongly plundering, terrorizing, and destroying, Chamas. Mizmowr 27:12. It is true that, lo, I am certain, knowing what is established, verifiable, and true, Aman. I have looked upon and witnessed, even revealed, La Raba, the goodness and fairness, the appropriateness and attractiveness, Tub, of Yahowah, in the land of the living, Ba, Eretz Chaim. Mizmowr 27:13. You should choose to confidently place your expectations for a beneficial result, looking forward, Kawa, to, El, Yahowah. You should want to be strong and prevail, to be as tough as you are intense, Chazak. And with your courageous character and reinforced judgment, Wa, Amitz Leb Ada, choose to confidently place your expectations for a beneficial result by looking forward, Wakawa, to, El, Yahowah. Mizmowr/lyrics to be sung /Psalm 27 verse 14. With every word, it is as if Dowd is explaining this portion of his 22nd Mizmowr to us. Not only did Dowd come to appreciate the enduring love and support of his heavenly father and spiritual mother all the more because he was deprived of a loving birth mother and father during his initial lives, so would be his herald. And it would be as a direct result of his Basar that Dowd would rise above his adversaries and be accepted by his people for what he has achieved, which is why he mentioned the sacrificial offering that will be made by the red heifer during Teruah. As a prophet, Dowd knew how all of this would play out over time. Also relevant, while he allowed his body to be mutilated, Dowd, as Yahowah's anointed, was a handsome man. And as Yahowah's firstborn son, he will return in God's image and be magnificent to behold. But this time, during the second of 3 appearances, the Basar Dowd's nepesh occupied would have become immaterial after fulfilling his mission. His corporeal form would be discarded following the abuse. Come Bikurim, he would be delighted to be free of it as I will be of mine as Teruah passes into Kippurim. Recognizing Dowd's brilliance, I wouldn't be surprised if he also intended for us to consider how the metaphors he selected also applied to the Yatzah, Exodus, since he was reenacting an intensely personal manifestation of it. The symbolic message inherent during the initial experience of Chag Matsah begins with the doorway to liberation and life being opened during Pesach while the firstborn of their religious and political oppressors were dying all around them. The children of Yisrael walked out of Eretz Mitzrayim during Matzah, entering the Sinai wilderness on this day. It was indicative of walking away and disassociating from the caustic and controlling influence of religion and politics, thereby unyeasting their souls of its corrupting stench. Then during Bikurim, they would be reborn in a flood of water, entering their new life, as the sea came crashing down behind them. After receiving the Torah and following a period of attitude adjustment for infantile tantrums, they were headed to the promised land as children who would be nurtured by the milk she would provide. Before you, Ada, toward, beside, and in association with you, because of and concerning you, I was cast out of, Shalach Min, you were compelled to throw me out, casting me off, forth, down, out, and away from, hopeful perfect, the point of origin as an act of compassion and love, Rechem, the uterus or womb, the child gestating and childbearing organ of the female, a spatial position indicative of the source who is merciful, from Rechem, love, mercy, affection, and compassion. From Min, the womb, Biten, the uterus in the abdomen, of my mother, Eni, my biological mother, you are, Ada, my God, Eni. Mizmowr / Psalm 22 verses 9 to 10. Shalach isn't a comforting term. It means to throw, cast, hurl, or fling, even to throw away and cast down. This clearly places the soul cast out of heaven and thrown away, temporarily, during Matzah in a tough situation. But that's just the beginning of the harsh implications. The hopeful stem is uncommon because it is inconsistent with free will. It indicates that the subject, Yahowah in this case, was forced, or at the very least, compelled, to part with him for a while, such that Dowd was cast out of the spiritual realm. Therefore, the arguments in favor of the son fulfilling Chag Matsah had to be so compelling his father did what was necessary. Fortunately, in the perfect conjugation, the compulsion and intensity of being cast off was short-lived, literally once and done during a moment in time. With the hopeful stem being applied by Dowd when addressing Yahowah, it speaks volumes about the conclusions that we have drawn. Dowd's arguments on behalf of his soul being allowed to serve in this way were convincing, indeed, undeniable. To earn Yisrael's respect to the extent required to serve as their eternal king, Dowd wanted this opportunity and wouldn't take no for an answer. A brilliant man made a compelling argument. Further, there is no greater expression of love than when a man willingly lays down his life to save his family. Beyond what this sacrifice achieved in the long term for Yisrael and her king, there was also a significant benefit for Yahowah. Pesach and Matzah lead to Bikurim firstborn children, representing our inclusion into the covenant. Dowd's nepesh was the only way to create a literal fulfillment, and both father and son knew it. The concluding thought is also indicative of Dowd's status. Devoid of a verb, it literally reads, "From womb of my mother you God of mine." So, no matter how we shape the action, it is apparent that Dowd and Yahowah have a history together. During their initial romp around the paddock, it is likely that they met while Dowd was shepherding sheep in Bethlehem, perhaps as early as 6 to 7 years young. He would be introduced to us as the anointed Messiah at 8. It was then that the boy who had not known the love of a mother or devotion of a father was embraced by the best of both, with God becoming his father and the Ruach Kodesh serving as his spiritual mother. Upon his return, their father and son relationship was already well developed, having spent the past 1,000 years together. And this time, at least initially, Dowd would enjoy the love of his adoptive family. The prophetic portrayal of the Passover lamb is always that of a person. God is in a man. Recognizing then that being human was the only viable option, we are faced with the realization that it would have been impossible for such an individual to be perfect in every thought, deed, and phrase without God's assistance. Therefore, since the Pesach Ale Passover lamb must be without fault, this was accomplished by observing the Torah and being anointed with the Spirit. Its purpose, to perfect the imperfect, applies to everyone, but most especially Dowd. He said as much, and we should take him at his word. In this regard, there is no basis for the notion that Miriam Mary, in the unlikely event that this would have been her name, was unmarried, a virgin, or even a mother. Her mythical projection was derived from Astarte, the mother of God and queen of heaven in the Babylonian religion. In Hebrew society, there were no marriage vows. A woman traveling with a man, living with him, and raising a family was either his wife or concubine. Also pursuant to his re-entry, by using Dowd's soul, he would not need parents to demonstrate that he was a descendant of himself and ultimately of Jacob and Abraham. His lineage was established 1,000 years previous to this event. For what it is worth, Miriam would not be a good choice of names. It is from Mary and directly related to Meribah, as in the waters of. It means contentious, rebellious, and embittered, and speaks of provoking strife. The secondary definition of Mary is gross and domineering fatling. Mary is actually from the verbal root, mara, to be disobedient and rebellious. Yes, it was also the name of Moses' sister, but in her case, since Yahowah struck her with leprosy, it was fitting. There is also no validity to the notion that Gabriel, who is actually Dowd, met with Dowd's non-mother, although such a conversation would have been entertaining. Gabriel, from Gibbor and Hel, describes Dowd as the most courageous and competent man of God. So, "Hi, Mom, I'm gonna be your kid even though I'm also your great-grandfather 50 times over. You may have heard of me. Anyway, I'm going to be slaughtered as the Passover lamb, so don't get too attached. And that's actually the easy part because, come Matzah, I'm going to hell. So, let's chat again in, say, 9 months. With these thoughts dancing in our minds, as we move on to the next statement, we find the then future and now past, sacrificial soul pleading with Yahuwah, asking him not to abandon him. He recognizes that he is headed to a rendezvous with Satan, the adversary, where he will be afflicted. He knows that nothing exists that can protect him from this ordeal. It is the destiny he has chosen. And this, too, was necessary. We find that Dowd is now speaking about the means to fulfill unyeasted bread. His soul was headed to the place of Ratchak, being severed and avoided, removed and separated. He is bemoaning Sheol, the lightless prison, where imperfect spiritual souls endure eternity. Separation from Yahuwah is the only appropriate penalty for those who have led others away from God. This means that without the perfecting implications of Matzah, where our souls are unleavened from the fungus of religion and politics, the aforementioned sacrifice on Pesach, where we become immortal, would otherwise be counterproductive. So, Dowd's soul asks of Yahuwah, do not continually distance yourself from me by allowing your relationship with me to be severed for a prolonged period. Al Rachak min any, do not actually recede from me, avoiding me beyond the needed period. With you sending me so far away from you there is no return. Kal in perfect Joseph, because, ky, the oppressive confinement and anguish, Sarah, the troubling oppression of internment, the unavoidable suffering and emotional distress associated with incarceration and the distressful imprisonment with the adversary, from Sarah, of being hard-pressed, diminished, bound, cramped, and constrained, vexed and harassed, is imminent, karob, personal, approaching, and near in spacetime. And yet, indeed, ky, no one, nothing, can help, azar, can provide support, assistance, or aid, kal participle. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 11. Thank God for the Hebrew language with its conjugations, otherwise, this would have been unbearable. While the imperfect, when associated with Ratchak, speaks of ongoing and continuous separation, since he negated it with Al, Dowd realized that his time in Sheol away from Yahuwah would be finite, one horrific day, but no more. Although, by contrast, it was the furthest place from heaven, where he had been for the past 1,000 years. When I put myself into the scene painted by Dowd's words, and when I try to feel what he was experiencing at this moment, it strikes me that he wasn't complaining about enduring the horrific pain associated with the Roman flogging or even the excruciating nature of crucifixion but, instead, was lamenting the anguish of his relationship with Yahuwah being momentarily severed. It was the thought of the imminent, unavoidable, and temporal distancing from his father in Sheol, the lair of Satan, that was so anguishing. And yet, this is the sacrifice he made out of enduring love for his people that not one in a million so much as acknowledges. This is the reason there are so many prophecies devoted to resolving this great injustice. It is why Yada Yahowah was written. Since Tzara serves as the operative verb defining the Yisraelite subjugation within the religious and political regime of Mitzrayim, it is obvious now that Dowd was, indeed, presenting his Matzah exodus from Sheol as an intensely personal reenactment of the Yatzah exodus. His anguish would come from Tzara being constrained and diminished. He would Tzara surrender his freedom and be incarcerated. Sheol would be Tzara distressing, emotionally anguishing, and painful. And during this time, he would be with the Tzara rival and competitor to God's company, the adversary. Hell would be Tzara vexing, a time of troubling tribulation and oppressive affliction. Satan the adversary has long been Dowd's rival, the one who saw himself as being in competition with him for human souls. But as a result of what Dowd has done, when he returns, Satan will be cast into Sheol and remain. There, he will experience Tzara incarceration, being bound, constrained, and diminished. These are the attributes of Sheol, which is essentially a black hole. Further, Tzara is the same word Yahuwah has used to depict the time of Jacob's troubles. This then suggests that Dowd will have endured Tzara on behalf of his people, Yisrael, thereby earning the right to liberate them from it on Kippurim. Dowd's ordeal on behalf of Yisrael would be karob, imminent, personal, unavoidable, and near. At a place and moment in spacetime of a location and duration certain from the perspective of the participant, bad things were going to occur. He knew it. A hellacious price would be paid to honor Yahuwah's Matzah promise to perfect the covenant family. We find Tzara embedded within Mitzrayim, this Mizmowr, and the time of Jacob's troubles because Yahuwah has and will engage to deliver the children of Yisrael, the embodiment of Yisrael, and the final remnant of Yisrael from Tzara anguishing torment. The Exodus, fulfillment of Chag Matsah, and the reconciliation of Yisrael upon Yahuwah's return are different phases of the same experience and story. Dowd's foreboding song reveals that, on the cusp of being tormented by Satan, the Romans continued to humiliate him, ripping the flesh from the remnant of his body. And to think that for most Jews and Christians alike, it was for naught. It's as if Passover and unyeasted bread were never fulfilled. Numerous, a great many, fiercely aggressive soldiers, fearsome and powerful warriors, even supernatural beings, bullish beasts, frustrated bulls and wild asses, of the aggressively attacking supernatural, powerful, fighting, bullish, and spiritual warrior, serpent, Bashan, snake, related to Bahana, shame, a metaphor for Satan, surround me, sabab any. They assemble around and encircle me, turning on me during this time, kal perfect. They have besieged and crowned me in hostile fashion, cat heart any, in a coordinated fashion they gather about to hem me in, threatening me while adorning me with a circular crown. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 12. Was a clever choice because it depicts fiercely aggressive soldiers, in the first instance when modifying the bullish beasts and wild asses and then describes an aggressively attacking supernatural serpent when paired with Bashan in the second. He would initially feel the sting of Roman warriors and then that of powerful Malachite fighting on behalf of Satan the adversary. Often worshipped as a sun god, Lord Baal was represented by a bull, not only because of its strength but because the sun crosses the constellation of Taurus the bull during Pesach Passover. And, of course, God chose an Egel, Barak, and Parah to oppose Satan's influence. Therefore, for everything Yahowah does, Shakar has a counterfeit. Since it is implied in this prophecy, there may be some merit to the story that the King of Kings would be forced to wear a crown of thorns, one comprised of the same intertwined thickets that caught the lamb on Mount Moriah on behalf of Abraham, Yitzhak, and the covenant. They were witnessing a dress rehearsal for the seminal event of human history. They open, Patsah, they part, their mouths, Pehem, against me, Al-Eni, toward, like a fearsome beast, Aryeh, a destroying lion and assassin in search of prey, mangling and tearing me to pieces as a violent and abhorrent way to die, Tariff, plucking off my skin, ripping apart my soft tissues with sharp objects, violently flailing me so as to inflict a repugnant death, while roaring loudly, Sha'agi, making an anguishing guttural sound that is thunderous. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 13. As Dowd returns to document the ordeal he endured fulfilling Pesach, he reveals that the beast of Rome was ripping his body to shreds, tearing it apart with whips. His soul felt the burning sting of every lash. Dowd's anguish on behalf of Yisrael and the covenant family was no less tortuous than being flayed alive. Second only to crucifixion, it was the most abhorrent way to die. And while Rome inflicted the carnage, not a single Jew lifted a finger to spare their Messiah and King of the needless anguish. A painless death would have sufficed, but not for Romans. Even as a church, they love torturing Jews. And so this is also how Satan and his minions will bludgeon Yada to death as the red heifer. Long before these sadistic implements of pain were conceived, Dowd David wrote of what he would experience. Blood would have dripped from his pen. Tariff conveys mangling of the flesh by ripping it from the body with sharp objects, providing a poignant, yet accurate, description of the abuse inflicted by 50 lashes by a metal-barbed whip, which was Rome's approach to those they perceived as threats to their supremacy. Yet, removing muscle tissue from Dowd's shoulders, back, chest, arms, and legs was insufficient by Roman standards. Our great hero would go on to describe the most horrid form of execution ever conceived by man. 5 centuries before crucifixion with ropes was invented by the Assyrians, and 700 years before it was perfected by the Romans to include nails, Dowd previews its piercing violence. We are about to discover that his prophecies are painfully precise. So that you will be able to more fully appreciate what follows, one of crucifixion's most telling attributes is that it causes the victim's bodily fluids to drain into their lungs, leaving them parched. While dying of thirst, they drown. Bones are not broken, but both shoulders and other major joints are dislocated. Oxygen depletion occurs because the victim is unable to stretch their diaphragm while hanging by their arms, causing carbon dioxide toxicity in the bloodstream. This results in strength melting away, starting with the heart muscles. We know this today, but these facts were not known 3,000 years ago, which is when these words were inscribed by Dowd. That makes his depiction extraordinary. His physical mortality was ebbing away. As water, ka-ha-maim, as it pertains to bodily fluids, I am poured out and weakened, shapak, I am drained and emptied, nifle perfect. And, all of, kol, each of, my most substantial bones, etzem, any, my limbs, are stretched, separated, and out of joint, pared, have parted and are dispersed, hippiel perfect, clearly states that at this moment he is not being assisted by anyone and is enduring this on his own initiative. My heart is now, leb any haya, my heart has come to be, kal perfect, like wax, ka-ha-downag. It has melted, wasting away along with, masses ba talk any, it is dissolving, weakened and discouraged, within, nifle perfect, my internal organs, mia any, the core of my body. Mizmowr 22:14. Like sun-baked dust, Kaha shares, similar to a broken vessel of earthenware, my vigor and strength, coach any, my vitality and potential, my physical muscular power, are withered and failed, yabesh, are dried up without moisture and incapacitated such that they no longer respond, kal perfect. And, my tongue, lashon any, cleaves, dabak, clings and is made to stick, hopeful passive, to the roof of my mouth, malcoach any, to my palate. So, upon, drawing near and approaching, the dust, afar, of the natural earthen material and ready to be pulverized, from 4 QPs, of death, moth, of the plague, they have placed me, validating why I'm here, shapath, they have put me here to ratify my purpose, for QPs, they placed, versus, you laid, in MT, cal imperfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 15. That is precisely how crucifixion kills, right down to its most unique symptoms. The victim's inability to inhale robs their body of oxygen, and thus energy, causing coach a helpless incapacity to perform any needed function. Likewise, yabesh, in association with Mia Ba talk, describes a withering paralyzed state in which the body no longer responds to the brain's motor function commands. The textual base of Sher's potsherd is identical to charash, meaning to be silent while others plot evil, devising a plan of action that cuts and separates. All the while, his expendable physical body, comprised of the elements of the earth, was broken, being deprived of the fluids being drained into his lungs, suffocating him. Moth is death personified. It is the disease that plagues us. Fully amplified, moth conveys the physical trauma of the body dying, the infliction of a disease that causes death, and a judgment in which the penalty is a death sentence. It is derived from, and at the consonant level spelled identically to, muth, those who are executed and dispatched to die. The body Dowd's soul was still clinging to was in the final throes of serving as the Passover lamb. It would soon die so that we wouldn't suffer the same consequence. Then his soul would be laden with the corruption of his people and taken to Sheol, the place of separation, in our stead. By bearing Yisrael's rebellion against Yahuwah, he exonerated and pardoned his people on unyeasted bread. The character of the overtly political and religious hasn't changed much over the years. Addressing the Romans who became Roman Catholics, Dowd declared, For indeed, the contemptible scum and abased yelpers, Caleb, loud and attacking, unfaithful pagan dogs, evil male prostitutes of a lowly status and violent nature, puppets and traitors, have surrounded me, they have encircled me like a swirling wind. A politicized religious community providing the testimony, Ada, the congregation acting like a gang in a herd serving as witnesses, of the disastrously corrupt, RAA, of those who are wrong, disturbing, evil, and injurious, establishes a destructive annual cycle to denigrate what I'm doing, they go around me, severing me from my source in a destructive fashion. They bore into, karu, they dug into and pierced, 5/6 HEVPS has karu, a variation of kara, dig, bore, pierce while the MT has kairi, like a lion, my hands, yad, and my feet, wa regal any. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 16. These canines would be wolves, Roman and Pauline. Over time, their unifying political and corrupt religious testimony would create a new cycle of events from Easter to Christmas. In so doing, they would completely denigrate Dowd's sacrifice. There would be no provision for Chag Matsah on the religious calendar of Christians or Jews. By denying Dowd's great sacrifice, they would preclude their own participation in the covenant while blocking their path to God. The enormity of what he had done was for naught, at least, for the false witnesses. It was replacement philology at its worst. As the Romans struck their blows, pounding nails into Dowd's wrists, which were considered part of the hand in the 1st century, and into his heels, they, bore through them with primitive nails constructed of tapered iron rods. While using such crude implements in this excruciating fashion was repulsive, even reprehensible, there remains a far greater crime here than mutilating and murdering the Messiah. If you are a Jew, faithful to the religious traditions of the rabbis, what I'm going to share ought to make you angry. To keep you from knowing that your Messiah, Dowd, served as the Pesach ale, rabbis altered the passage to read, like a lion are my hands and feet. This was not a mistake. It was done on purpose. All these many years later, even with the Dead Sea Scroll found at Nahal Hever in 1950 in the Septuagint confirming Karu bore into rather than Kairi like a lion, Jewish scholars are still unwilling to acknowledge that Dowd, as a prophet, accurately described what he, as a great hero, endured. They argue in favor of the Masoretic text. Their last vestige of denial comes by way of suggesting that the writing on the 2nd century BCE fragment, over 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text, is too faint to read with certainty. However, you can look it up online, as I have done, and see a picture of it for yourself if you are still wondering who to trust. The Hebrew word ends in a wa, not a yaud. The hands and feet of the Passover lamb were nailed to an upright pillar on Moriah during the 4,000th observance of the Mikra. But the Romans who did so were not the only criminals seeking to negate Dowd's sacrifice. Rabbis played their role, too. Since what I am claiming regarding this prophecy is easily verified and accurate, it means that Dowd wrote that his hands and feet would be pierced 5 centuries before crucifixion was conceived by the Assyrians and 700 years before the piercing style of Roman execution was invented. It also means that the most esteemed rabbis are liars who should not be trusted. The authors of the oral traditions were deceitful men who were willing to alter God's testimony to suit their own personal agendas. The prophet, Zechariah, had a great deal to say about the role of father and son in this sacrifice. And since it is especially relevant to this passage, we would be remiss if we didn't share Zechariah 12:10 before we complete the Mizmowr. YAHOWAH is anticipating this moment. And, for a time, I will pour out, Shapak, I will provide an outpouring and build upon the house, Al-Baith, on behalf of the family and home, of Dowd, the beloved, of the 1076 occurrences of DWD. This was one of the few in a prophetic text scribed DWID, adding a Yod representing the hand of Yah, and upon, Al, also on behalf of, those who dwell in, Yashab, the inhabitants who establish their abode and remain in, Yerushalayim, the source of guidance. And teaching on reconciliation, a spirit of compassion and acceptance, Ruach Chen, the spirit of favor and mercy, of a beautiful and beneficial spiritual garment, for those requesting mercy and clemency, Takanin, of being treated with kindness and affection, with compassion, from Chanan, mercy and favorable treatment. Then, they will be able to look, Nabat, they, at this time, will be equipped to observe, focus upon, pay attention to, and regard, think about and then appropriately respond, to me, Any, accompanied by the one whom, Asher, with whom by association, and to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, they had reviled and pierced, Dakar, they had thrust into by driving sharp implements completely through, Kal perfect, and, they will lament, Saphat, they will sob. Expressing their genuine sorrow, Kal perfect, over him, Alhu, just like, Ka, similar to the way, one cries, Misped, one shrieks and howls, over the most uniquely special child and valued life, Al-Hayakid, for the only son, from Yachad, who reunited and joined together, anguished and infuriated, Wamarar, grieving furiously, angry and enraged, even frantic, over him, Alhu, on his account, consistent with, Ka, the anguish suffered over, Marar, Al. The frustration and rage endured over. The firstborn, Habakkuk, the first son born into a family. Zechariah/remember Yah/Zechariah 12 verse 10. From the perspective of YAHOWAH allowing his son to serve as the Pesach, Isle and then to fulfill Matzah, this prophetic pronouncement sings to our hearts, reassures our minds, and comforts our souls. At long last, we can appreciate how and why this is possible and when it will occur. The last opportunity for reconciliation is being poured out in this special way and at this opportune moment on behalf of the household of Dowd. The Messiah represents Yisrael individuals who engage and endure with God, Yehudah the beloved of Yah, and the Berith covenant family, such that the Beit Dowd household of Dowd is comprised of select individuals representing a fusion of Yisrael, Yehudah, and Haberith. And this is because there will be 3 distinct groups awaiting the king's return. The remaining mortal remnant of Yisrael will be joined by the covenant family harvested 7 years prior during Shabuah and the more recent gleaning of Yehudim during Towrah. God and King are returning to Jerusalem, the source of guidance on reconciliation on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations. As a result of what they have done for the family during the preceding 5 micro-EY invitations to be called out and meet with God, there will be an outpouring of compassion from the Ruach Spirit upon those who have gathered to receive them. It will be the ultimate family reunion. Our Heavenly Father, spiritual Mother, and beloved Son, our Savior, have returned to claim their own. For the first time in 3,480 years, since the children of Yisrael gathered around Mount Choreb and said that they did not want to see or hear from Yahuwah again, a final remnant will be prepared and ready for both by the sacrificial offering of the red heifer. Having been cleansed of their religious and political guilt, and with a newfound appreciation for Yahuwah's name and his Son's acclaim, they will eagerly anticipate their homecoming. God will, of course, be accompanied by the one Yisrael reviled and Rome pierced. And this is as it should be, since the beast did not crucify God but, instead, the one most beloved by him. Recognizing the benefits he was providing, and how inappropriately people responded to him, those gathered before Father and Son are going to be genuinely sorry for the years of denial. The reaction will be bittersweet, but initially more weeping than shrieking. It is hard to imagine Jews looking upon Father and Son realizing what their ancestors had done, only to add insult to injury by failing to appreciate his gift for 2,000 to 3,000 years, depending upon whether one counts from the time he announced what he would do or from when he accomplished it. The early evening of October 2, 2033 will be the first opportunity to apologize to Dowd and then express gratitude. For Jews, they will be conflicted, horribly embarrassed for failing to recognize his sacrifice, and exceedingly joyful knowing that he earned the right to be their king. He saved them. This surviving remnant of Yisrael, and all those comprising the covenant family, will have made the connection between the Son who is given in Yashayah 9 and the Lamb who was sacrificed in Yashayah 53, between the firstborn of Mizmowr 89 and the Bakar of Zechariah 12, between the piercing here and also in Psalm 22. With all of this having occurred as foretold, and with Yahuwah and Dowd returning to Jerusalem, it will be hard to hold back the tears as we witness our King in all of his glory and visualize the God our forefathers ignored. Dowd's initial life among us 3,000 years ago was the most amazing in human history. He was the consummate poet and lyricist, shepherd and king, father of his nation and son of God, a prolific prophet and heroic defender of his people. His life was so tumultuous, he represented the best and worst of Yisrael. But in his relationship with Yahuwah, he became the exemplar of the covenant. And yet, sadly, most of what he came to represent was stolen from him to legitimize religions he would have vehemently condemned. Dowd's second life 2,000 years ago was the most compassionate and magnanimous in the long history of humankind. He volunteered to have his soul sent down from heaven and placed in a human body to serve as the Passover lamb to open the doorway for his people to come home. And then, he carried the guilt of the covenant family into Sheol, depositing it there so that we might be perfected and live with him and his Father forevermore. He wrote openly and graphically of what he would endure, and then he fulfilled his vows in the sight of his people. And yet, no one credited him with the most heroic and compassionate acts in the history of humankind. Worse, his people denied the micro-EY were fulfilled, while the Goyim attributed his sacrifice to a figment of their imagination, damning Jews in the process. The 22nd Mizmowr was written during Dowd's initial life, about his second of 3 lives. It is hard to imagine what was going through his mind at the time. With Zechariah 12, we come full circle. The Bakar firstborn during his life as the king of Yisrael is projected through his return to fulfill the micro-EY as he was pierced for his people's redemption. The prophet then propels us into the future and onto his third arrival as he returns as king of the universe with his Father, who created it. Those who rejected him are now grateful for what he accomplished. And those who disavowed his Father are now referring to God by name. Just as there are 3 40-yable epochs of 2,000 years between our expulsion from the garden to our return to it courtesy of Father and Son, the Messiah will have been here 3 times over the past 3,000 years. He showed us the way home, made it possible for us to go home, and will be there to greet us when we arrive. On the day of reconciliations, as the sun sets on October 2nd, in the Babel year of 2033, 6,000 Yah, Father and Son will return to Jerusalem as a reconciled mortal remnant of Yisrael, and immortal members of the covenant family look on with tear-filled eyes, many finally recognizing what actually occurred on the Passover Dowd both witnessed and endured. Returning to Golgotha on this day, Pesach in the Babel of 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, we find that Dowd predicted. I can count, Saphar, I can record, measure, and make an accounting of, relating to, all, Kol, my bones, Etzamoth, my skeleton and limbs. They, themselves, stare as they look right through me, Nabat Raba any. Mizmowr /song/Psalm 22 verse 17. The Romans were savages, but their bloodlust was partially moderated by breaking the legs of most crucifixion victims so that they would be unable to control their diaphragm and breathe. Once the capacity to push up against the nails that had been driven through the ankles was curtailed by broken fibulas, it effectively eliminated the ability to draw air into the lungs, causing them to suffocate from oxygen deprivation. While this sounds cruel, it was actually done to expedite death, shortening the duration of the agony from days to hours. This was especially relevant when the gruesome specter of crucifixion was visible to the religious pilgrims in Jerusalem for Passover. And it's hard to observe the Sabbath when one's view of the sunset is interrupted by the sight of Romans torturing the Passover lamb. But such was not the case with Dowd. He had been whipped to the precipice of death prior to being crucified. So, his body would succumb in a timely fashion without any of his bones being broken. This known, I'm confident that Yahuwah anesthetized his son's pain and shortened his suffering, as I expect that he will do with mine as the red heifer. The second portion of this prophetic pronouncement suggests that, even with all he had written about his sacrifice on behalf of his people, they, nonetheless, looked right past him and through him, unable to fathom what was occurring before their eyes. And they have continued to do so for the past 2,000 years. Since words paint pictures, it is especially relevant to know that the body in which Dowd's soul was residing was not hung from a cross on a hill far away as in Christian mythology. Romans crucified their victims along major roadways. It was more humiliating and served as a deterrent. Golgotha, the place of the skull, is just outside the Damascus Gate and sits directly beneath what was the summit of Mount Moriah during Abraham's day. Portions of the mountain were carved away to enlarge the Temple Mount and bolster the city's walls. The place of the skull faces the main road leading north out of town. Today, the site of the crucifixion is the back parking lot for the Jerusalem bus station. The only artifact I've ever treasured is a piece of limestone I gathered from this place. In all likelihood, the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant lies directly beneath, protected in Yirmiyahu's grotto. The implement of death unto which Dowd was nailed did not look like a Christian cross. In fact, the Greek word used to describe it is stauros, which means upright pole. A vertical post was set and left in a recess carved into the limestone rock. And then, the horizontal component of the apparatus was placed on top of the pole once the victim was affixed to it. It would have looked like a capital T. Although, its shape and name are irrelevant and contribute nothing to our well-being, Christianity's dead God on a stick is insulting, errant, and grotesque. All that said, I would like to propose a different interpretation of this declaration. I think Dowd may have been drawing our attention to the corporeal nature of the Passover lamb with Sapar Kol Etzemoth, revealing that this accounting was entirely physical. Neither his soul, nor Yahuwah's spirit who would carry it away or die, just his body, serving as the Pesach aisle. Providing the fodder transferred into the Christian New Testament, we find Dowd revealing. They divide, chalak, they plunder, assign, and distribute, my garments, begged, any, my apparel and clothing, among themselves, lahem, and, wa, for, al, my clothing, labush, any, my garments, they cast lots, naphal gaurel, they get down on their knees to toss pebbles to claim a portion. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 18. Dowd was pointing out something quite profound. As he was making it possible for us to live forever as part of Yahuwah's family, inheriting all that God has to offer, Romans were looking down, playing with pebbles to determine who could steal his dirty, blood-stained laundry. And while this no doubt occurred, and was relevant for the reason I've just shared, Christians have misappropriated it to prop up their faith. Without any corroborating evidence, they postulate that their Jesus fulfilled another prophecy, or at least, the Romans had done so. And while it proved nothing other than Christian desperation, there is a serious problem with the gospel attestation. This was written in first person by the most famous of Jews and, most assuredly, not by Jesus. My means, might not his. But alas, if these Romans had been Roman Catholics, they would have scooped his apparel up, designated his robe as a holy relic, and then erected a lavish shrine so that the faithful could worship it while they collected a visitor's fee. With Dowd's last words on the upright pole, Yahuwah's spirit departed, leaving the soul of the Passover lamb to bear the guilt of every covenant member. He pleads. But you, Yada Yahowah, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his Hayah, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, you will not be far away for a protracted period of time, Lo, Rachak, you will not continually disassociate yourself from me, Kal perfect Joseph. This prophetic statement affirms two things. During Matzah, Yahuwah and Dowd would be separated from one another but not for long. This is why Rachak was scribed with a negation of the imperfect conjugation. The Messiah's pronouncement also provides the set-apart spirit with a descriptive title. Ayaloth is the feminine plural of Ayal, one who assists and helps, empowers and strengthens. My Ayaloth, my source of strength and help, Ayaloth any, one who empowers and assists me, she who provides aid, making me effective and influential, feminine plural form of Ayal/Ayal, the strength, fortitude, and ability of the ram opening the doorway, it is my desire and your decision, my choice and your will to act quickly, hastening the process, rapidly rushing in with the minimum passage of time, Chush. You and I want you to be prepared to act as swiftly as possible, Kal. Imperative second person singular pedagogic ecohortative, to assist in my rescue by supporting me, La, Ezra any. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 19, 2220 JPS. Just as the Hebrew language was embodied with the unique capability of limiting or extending the action of a verb over time, it was endowed with the ability to express volition in first, second, or third person. And here as before, we find that minimizing Dowd's tenure in Sheol is his will and God's choice, his desire and Yahuwah's decision. Obviously, Dowd wanted his time confined in the lightless realm of Sheol to be limited. And he realized that, since no one had ever been retrieved from hell, he would be reliant on the set-apart spirit whom he was calling his Ayaloth source of strength and assistance. She would be working with Dowd to empower the Passover lamb and help open Pesach's door and then perfect the covenant family by removing our guilt. Ayaloth, pronounced as Yoth Luth, is being used as a divine title, similar to Elohim, although now in conjunction with the set-apart spirit. This proper noun appears this one time in the Nabi prophetic text. Ayaloth is the feminine form of Ayal and, thus, is the power behind the Passover lamb opening the doorway to heaven. The name reveals that our spiritual mother is Ayal, devoted to providing us with the ability to do whatever is required, empowering us such that we benefit from the Pesach Ale and find our way home to Yah. On this day, she would abandon the dying body and then escort the surviving soul from Pesach to Matzah, from Jerusalem to Sheol to fulfill unyeasted bread, taking our collective guilt along with him. Once there, she would observe from the outside for the ensuing 24 hours of Matzah, referencing earth time rather than Sheol time, which would pass more quickly, remaining vigilant and prepared to aid and abet Dowd's release. Thereupon, she would envelop Dowd's nepesh and empower him, preparing him for his return in conjunction with firstborn children. Yahuwah has consistently called his spirit the Ruach Kodesh, which means set-apart spirit. Because ruach is a feminine noun, this reveals that Yah's spirit represents God's maternal nature. And by being Kodesh, we know that our spiritual mother is set apart from Yahuwah to serve those who are set apart from man's ways. That is to say that she comes from Yah, that she is part of Yah, and that she is set apart from Yah to ensure that we are seen as separate and distinct from religion and politics. Knowing this, Dowd is confirming his rendezvous with the set-apart spirit, affirming that the Hialoth will be there to liberate his soul from the black hole of Sheol when the job is done. It is my desire and your will, my choice and yours, to deliver my soul, to snatch away and save my soul, Natsal nepesh any, you want as do I for you to do what is required to rescue and liberate my consciousness, hyphal imperative second person singular paragogic cohortative, from the horror, heat, desolation, and ruin, min choreb, my unique position as son and precious life as the firstborn child, yakid, any, from the influence, min yad, from the hand and actions, of the contemptible. Scum and abased yelpers, Caleb, loud and attacking, unfaithful dogs and evil male prostitutes of a lowly status and violent nature, puppets and traitors. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 20. The only aspect of the Messiah and King deployed during the fulfillment of Chag Matsah was Dowd's nepesh soul. And it would be snatched out of Sheol, liberated and saved by Yahuwah's Ruach Kodesh. On this, father, mother, and son were in full agreement. By rescuing Dowd's consciousness, Bikurim was fulfilled. The firstborn son of God would lead the way home, expecting us to follow. It is apparent that the abased yelpers who hounded Dowd during Pesach as he was being flayed alive were demonic and anticipated in Sheol. Although, there is another possibility. The Hebrew word for dog is Caleb. As a compound of kol al and leb heart, it suggests that those who are being so abusive, barking and sniping at the Messiah, are feelers, not thinkers, religious rather than rational. They were all heart and no head. There is another crime which must be exposed. The Masoretes vocalize the textual consonants chrb as cherub rather than choreb. The former is a knife, dagger, sword, axe, or chisel. Since Dowd's Passover ordeal included whipping and the piercing torment of crucifixion, if the prophetic passage were changed to represent a plea to be spared from cutting instruments, Dowd's prophetic credentials and subsequent sacrifice would be disqualified, as it would not fit these predictions. Not knowing any better, the politically motivated clerics, who prepared the King James Version, perpetuated this mistake. Then, since the ASV, NIV, NKJV, and NASB are more revisions than new translations, they replicated the error. The King James Version published, "Deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the dog." They came up with "my darling" by including Yakid, only child, which was scribed after Caleb, evil yelpers, rather than making it part of the next statement. The New American Standard Bible, which claims to be literal, reads, "Deliver my soul from the sword, my only life from the power of the dog." The New Living Translation decided to ignore nepesh, soul, the most important word in this statement. "Save me from the sword, my precious life from these dogs." Correctly rendered, the passage is prophetically and historically accurate, informative and important. The set-apart spirit was tasked with the responsibility of retrieving Dowd's soul from the desolate lifelessness of Sheol, rescuing him from its horrible heat as well, something that is part and parcel of the event horizon of a black hole. Therefore, long before we were introduced to the concept of a black hole, we find some of its attributes depicted in this text. It is a horrible and ruinous place of complete destruction subject to intense heat. This experience is further detailed in Mizmowr/Psalm 88. Collectively, this is the who, when, how, and why behind the fulfillment of the first three micri Y. Yahuwah, Dowd, and the set-apart spirit were in one accord, all committed to establishing the covenant family. And they knew that our king would not be incarcerated any longer than was necessary. You want to liberate and save me, to rescue and deliver me, Yasha, any, it is your will to release me, sparing and redeeming me, hyphal imperative second person masculine singular, out of, min, the mouth, peh, of the fearsome and destructive beast, aria, of the fierce predator, the vicious one who hunts and savages his prey, plucking them away. And from, Wamin, the horns of the flashing light that has risen on high, Karen Ram, the horned one seeking the highest status in elevated places wanting to be lifted up and trumpeted as a supernatural source of light, you have answered me during my affliction, Anna, any, you have responded to me as I'm being harassed, Cal perfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 21, 22 in the JPS Tanakh. This is our second encounter with this fearsome beast, but this time, we learn even more about him. He is comprised of light and yet is horned and flashy. He seeks a degree of adulation only the highest status would bring. This would make the destructive beast none other than Satan. Taking this one step further, while Arya is often translated as lion, it is clearly symbolic in this refrain. This vicious predator maims its prey. Also telling, Arya forms the basis of Haritha, a name of Babylonian origin which identifies the founder of the Babylonian mystery religion. We should not be surprised then that the most common symbol for Babylon's god was a winged lion. The gates of Babylon were adorned with them. Dowd uses Arya in the 7th Mizmowr as a pseudonym for Satan's alliance with Shaul, an especially fearsome beast. He wrote, Yahuwah, my God, in you, I find a trusted and safe place, with you delivering me from all my pretentious pursuers, especially the boisterous who are verbally contentious against me. You are preserving me for a later time. Mizmowr 7:1, or otherwise, in the manner of a fiercely destructive being, a vicious beast in search of prey, Arya, he, to satiate his own cravings, will rip apart my soul, snatching it away and shredding it without sparing it. Mizmowr 7:2, the symbolic definition works exceedingly well in both citations. To ward off this beast, we can rely on Yahuwah's Anna testimony. His response provides the answer. Since many Hebrew words have a light and dark shading, let's consider an entirely different approach to the concluding statement of Mizmowr/Psalm 22 verse 21, and so, from Wamin, the brilliant light of this summit which lifts on high, Karen Ram, the supernatural source of light in this elevated place, you have answered me during my affliction, Anna Eni, you have responded to me during my distress. Cal Perfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22:21 20 seconds. I prefer this rendering because it not only addresses the location where this occurred and speaks of the Spirit's response, but it also serves to connect this portion of the prophecy with what occurred on Moriah 2,000 years earlier. Karen was used to depict the radiant nature of the Lamb Yahuwah promised to provide at this time. Staying focused on Dowd's amazing repertoire of inspired literature, no matter how his lyrics are rendered, the last four words of the 21st refrain are the most important and the least understood: Min, Karen, Ram and Anna. The JPS Tanakh, based upon the Masoretic text, conveys, "From the horns of wild oxen rescues me," JPS 1985, changing answers to rescues, because otherwise, the verse would turn God into oxen's horns. The NASB gets Anna correct but then commits a similar crime, rendering the passage as if God were a matador. "From the horns of the wild oxen you answer me." The ASV adds a "yeah, but," otherwise, reads like its descendant. The NIV dropped the reference to answering, Anna, and replaced it with save, Yasha, save me from the horns of the wild oxen. More creative still, the KJV, ignoring two of the four words and convoluting the others, translates, "For thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorns." That must be proof for Twistians that unicorns actually exist. So that we don't add to the stench, let's start over. Anna can convey something positive or negative depending upon the context. It is typically rendered as, to answer, to respond, to testify, or to reply, providing testimony as a witness. At the other extreme, if addressing what Dowd would endure on this day, Anna can be seen as affliction or humiliation. Anna, however, does not mean save or rescue. But what it does mean is important. God responds to those who seek him and are willing to rely upon him. Also, since Anna Eni was scribed in second person, it reads, "You answered me." Karen, as we have learned, has a wide range of definitions. It speaks of shining, being radiant, emitting and sending out brilliant rays of light supernaturally. Karen's horn symbolism can denote a desire for power and authority over a kingdom. And at times, it can mean flashy. As noted previously, Yahowah uses Karen in the same place and during the same phase of Abraham's dress rehearsal for Dowd's Passover sacrifice. Speaking of the sacrificial lamb that was substituted by Yahowah, God said he had shining horns of radiant light, Karen, brilliant flashing rays of light similar to lightning from a supernatural source, symbolic of power, status, and might, a trumpet for signaling a message, and was the summit of a mountain. In the 22nd Psalm, we are on that same mountain on the same day of the year, observing the same Micra, separated as these events are by exactly 40 Yobel or 2,000 years. Those who miss the meaning offered by the words within the passage, find their oxen and unicorns in the vowel pointing, not in the text itself. Strong's Concordance, based upon the King James Version, says, Ram is from Ram, and translates it as unicorn 9 times and is probably the great aurochs or wild bulls which are now extinct. The exact meaning is not known. Strong's goes on to report, Aramians lifted up and to rise, but they don't bother to explain what rising up has to do with wild bulls or unicorns, for that matter. And that's probably because those who align themselves with the spirit represented by the horned and flashy one go the opposite direction. Here is another illustrative example. The King James Version renders Bamidbar/Numbers 23:22 as, God brought them out of Egypt, he hath as it were the strength of a unicorn. But that's not what Moses wrote. The Torah doesn't demean its inspiration. Only men do that. The text actually reads, God delivered them out of the crucibles of Mitzrayim with the power, Topa, the ability through choice to deliver and, to raise them up to a higher place and status, Ram. Inaccurate diacritical markings can render God as foolish as a mythical unicorn or, in the case of the NASB, can put him in league with Satan. God brings them out of Egypt, he is for them like the horns of the wild ox. If nothing else, by exposing these comparisons, we find a reason to stop trusting the religious. An unfathomable amount of manure has been piled on top of Yahuwah's word. The truth is still there, as magnificent as ever, but sometimes we have to hold our noses while digging past man's garbage to find it. We were not with Abraham on Mount Moriah when his example foretold Dowd's sacrifice. We were not with Moses on empty Choreb when Yahuwah recounted this story to him for our edification. We were not with Dowd when he composed this song about what he would endure. And we were not standing outside the Damascus gate witnessing what our Messiah was doing for us on Passover as he fulfilled these words. But we have something equally revealing and reliable, the words our Savior wrote, and they are more than enough. And in them, we have affirmation that Dowd loved his father. I have chosen to continually recount, providing a written record, Saphar, I want to always proclaim, especially in writing, Peel in perfect cohortative, of your name, Shem, Ada, your personal and proper designation, reputation, renown, to my brethren, La, Achni, to my relatives, kin, countrymen, and family, within the midst of, Ba talk, the summoned community who have been called out, Kahal, the assembled who have gathered for this purpose, so as to radiate your brilliant source of enlightenment and extol your virtues, Halal, Ada, to become radiant and ongoing with you while commending your merit, Peel imperfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 22. Yisrael's most acclaimed shepherd and king, Yahuwah's Messiah and Son, recorded, related, recounted, declared, and proclaimed, God Shem, his personal and proper name. Too bad his brethren failed to follow his example. Dowd affirmed what his people have made a religion out of denying. It isn't just interesting, it is religion-shattering that Dowd never departs from his first-person account of Pesach and Matzah. He does not speak of another individual or ever address a third person. You will never find Jesus, or even Yahush's, name on his lips or scribed from the point of his pen. It simply does not exist. Since Yahuwah inspired every Nabi, since they are all keen on conveying Dowd's name and none mention someone named Jesus, this means that either no one by this name contributed meaningfully to his people or he had no interest in us knowing or using this name. And that makes the misnomer, Isu Christu, Jesus Christ, completely inappropriate from God's perspective. This crude counterfeit would be no more God than Julius Caesar. Curiosity prompts us to consider why the lie would be preferred 1,000,000 to 1 over the truth, especially since the world is preoccupied with the corruption of a name Yahuwah never mentions. A third of the planet's occupants will celebrate Christmas and Easter, even categorize themselves as Christians, when Jesus Christ never existed. Even his alleged death and resurrection make him more like Dionysus or Osiris than anyone spoken of by God. Dowd volunteered to endure the sacrifice because he loved Yahuwah and his people. Respect and revere, appreciate the astonishing awesomeness of Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, to radiate his light, Halal make his brilliant source of illumination clearly visible. Every, Kol, descendant, Zerah, seed, child, offspring, family, and progeny, of Yaakov, father of Yisrael who was renamed Yisrael, you should choose to consider him worthy of respect and massively significant, Kabad who, elect to hold him in high regard, valuing him immensely, Peel imperative. You should want to live with him, Wagur Minhu, you should choose to become a welcomed guest in his company, sojourning to the place where you dwell and remain as a result of your reverence and respect for him, Kal imperative, all you descendants of Yisrael, Min Kol Zerah Yisrael, including every child who engages and endures with God. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 23. Dowd was speaking of something he knew better than anyone. He recognized it when he wrote these songs, when he lived with his Father in heaven, at the conclusion of Pesach and Matzah, and especially when fulfilling Bikurim as Yahuwah's firstborn as the Messiah returned to heaven. More importantly, Dowd knows a great deal about respect, how it is earned and lost, and why it is so important. Much of the motivation for saving Yisrael by fulfilling Pesach and Matzah was to earn back the respect of his people that he had lost so that he could honorably lead them through eternity. There are two approaches to leadership, earned and imposed. Kings and generals demand compliance and achieve submission through fear. Questioning their edicts and orders comes at a high price and rejecting them is a deadly proposition. With them, their authority to rule is imposed through intimidation, incarceration, and death. Dowd had been a shepherd, and he knew the importance of earning the respect of his flock. He had tangled with lions and bears, risking his life to protect them. As a shepherd king, the Messiah was devoted to protecting his people and defending their home. He had earned their admiration when he slew the foremost warrior of the day who would have subjugated Yisrael had Dowd not prevailed. But he would squander it by the way he responded to Shaul, Absalom, and Bathsheba. Over his life, he earned it back and then gave it away. As Yisrael's greatest defender, the Zeroah, protective ram and sacrificial lamb knew that he would be able to endure whatever the Romans, as the Goliath of their day, brought to bear against him. This time, he would use the body his soul had occupied as the stone. The Ruach would be the sling. In so doing, he would earn his people's respect such that he would lead them as a shepherd, knowing that they trusted him. One more battle, just 2 days of conflict, would pay dividends forever. It was as brilliant as it was heroic. But knowing the full extent of the excruciating torture 1,000 years in advance, while recognizing that it would be another 2,000 years beyond that until anyone credited him for making these sacrifices for his people, and still be willing to carry out his commitment requires a level of courage and character exemplified in a single, solitary soul. So, now you know why Yahuwah chose him and loves him. Dowd was not just willing, he wanted to do it. He sang about it. 1 stone was all he would need to fell the devilish giant threatening his people. Although, when Yisrael denied Pesach's fulfillment and his foes turned the lamb into a god, it had to sting worse than the whips. As before, defending Yisrael by defeating those seeking to subjugate the people would be easier than subduing the more intrusive foe devouring the nation at its core, religion. To resolve it, Dowd's soul would accept our guilt, carry it with him into hell, and endure the mikra of Matzah in Sheol. After redeeming his people, Yahuwah liberated Dowd's nepesh, saving him in an act that further enhanced the son's respect for his father, which is why he is singing about it here. It would be a beautiful picture, with Dowd now bathed in his father's light. He would be the firstborn of Bikurim as a result of what he and his father had accomplished on Passover and unyeasted bread. Knowing many would follow, Dowd then encourages us to respect Yahuwah as he had done, expecting the same result. Dowd is describing the gift of the set-apart spirit and her garment of light. She has the ability to empower us and enlighten us, teaching us, while rendering us perfect in Yahuwah's eyes by immersing us in her brilliant light. She provides the spiritual rebirth required to be adopted into Yahuwah's family. What's particularly revealing in this regard is that halal means to radiate light, not reflect it. For this to occur, we must have the light source within us. When we are born anew from above in the set-apart spirit, she resides within us, becoming the source of our illumination, empowerment, and enlightenment. Halal is almost always translated as praise, but this is not its primary definition, and it misses the point. Halal's preferred connotation is to shine, to radiate bright and brilliant light, to make clear and visible by bringing forth the light, revealing its source. While the secondary meaning of the word can mean extol in the sense of admiring, in addition to boasting, these inferences can lead to the word's dark side. Halal's tertiary connotations include to make a show, and to be praised for it, to create a grandiose appearance, to be foolish, insolent, and arrogant. The darkness associated with halal's light exists because Jesus Christ wasn't the only counterfeit to torment God's people. According to the prophetic portrayal of Satan presented by Yahshua in Isaiah 14, Halal ben Shakar is the name of the most prevalent counterfeit god. He is the Lord of Christianity, the Allah of Islam, and the GD and Hashem of Judaism. The Messiah Dowd carried all that pertains to his aspirations to be worshipped as the god of religion into Sheol with him. It was the biggest of all burdens. As for Yahuwah, he did not create us to praise him. He is not insecure. Moreover, the idea of worshipping God is perverse. Having us worship him would be like having thoughtless tadpoles croak out that, by comparison to frogs, men are really swell, all while prostrating themselves to onlookers and choking down stray flies and swimming in slime. Creating an inferior being for this purpose would be narcissistic and psychotic. Sure, it is appropriate to acknowledge his goodness, greatness, and generosity. Like any parent, he would appreciate that as long as it is heartfelt and straightforward and not self-serving. It shows appreciation and adoration rather than genuflection in obeisance. Yahuwah expects us to stand upright and walk with him, not bow before him. Since Yahuwah wants us to engage in the covenant relationship with him, he cannot ask us to fear him. While I understand that almost every English Bible translates yar as fear, the word means to respect and revere. We cannot love while afraid. Fear breeds revulsion and contempt, not affection or respect. In Dowd's second of three statements from Psalm 22 verse 23, the operative verb is kabad. It is also the first word of the second of 7 instructions etched on the second stone tablet. It is used to describe the nature of the ideal relationship between children and their heavenly father and spiritual mother. And that is why this is set within the context of Jacob, the forefather of the children of Israel, and thus of the covenant family. Equally important, Dowd is still speaking of Yahuwah. The textual consonants that comprise kabad give rise to an important series of derivatives. Collectively, they convey weightiness, massiveness, significance, worth, value, abundance, glory, and greatness. In context, therefore, if we see Yahuwah as significant, he promises to view us the same way. If we respect Yahuwah's massive energy and power, he will share his with us. Value him and we will inherit his abundance. Acknowledge his greatness and he will bring us into his presence and clothe us in his glory. But, if you trifle with him and see him as insignificant, you will become so insignificant it will be as if you never existed. Disrespect his massiveness and you will be reduced to nothingness. Therefore, kabad defines the nature of the choice pertaining to a relationship with God and its consequences. Disregarding Yahuwah's intent, the JPS Tanakh tells us that we should dread him, with him being the Messiah. The King James Version, in its usual rut, reverts back to fear him. But the word underlying this message is gur, and it speaks primarily of abiding, dwelling, and remaining, residing as welcomed guests who gather together, living in harmony as part of one's sojourn through life. In modern parlance, gur would describe an enduring staycation, which would be ideal for those residing in Jerusalem. The truth was hard to miss because Yisrael individuals who engage and endure with God is in many ways analogous with gur in that the chosen people have been invited to live in Yah's home. The secret to our success is contained in these words. Indeed, KY, he has not relinquished his regard for or thought less of, lo, Baza, he has not shown contempt for or devalued, nor has he lost respect for, refused to consider, or abstain from, Cal perfect, nor has he rejected, while lo, Shakats, he has not shown antipathy or disdain toward or an aversion for, the responsive one who is afflicted and oppressed, enough any, the one who answers the summons, who engages and acts, is humble and unpretentious, who replies even while persecuted. From Anna, to answer, respond, and engage. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 24. While he is Yahuwah, the one who remains responsive even in the midst of his affliction is Dowd. And even though we will never endure this degree of persecution, it is a message for us, such that we also remain responsive to Yahuwah's calling, even in our darkest hour when all appears lost. And in this case, Dowd, after having accepted the guilt of every covenant member over thousands of years, would have been vulnerable to rejection. And yet, nothing would interfere with Yahuwah's enduring love for his son. Baza is the opposite of kabad. The basic meaning is, to accord little value to someone. It conveys disdain and a lack of respect or reverence. Baza can be rendered, to hold in contempt, to refuse or abstain from, or to treat as beneath one's notice or dignity. Dowd is, therefore, summarizing Yahuwah's policy, Baza for Baza, kabad for kabad. If you don't respect him and value his redemptive solution, you aren't going to trust him or rely on it. And since there is but one God, one source of life, and one Savior, by being Baza, by being of little worth, by being beneath one's notice, and by being alone and abandoned, Baza happens. The most interesting aspect of this statement might be the realization that both enuth and eni are based upon Anna, a word whose primary meaning is to respond by answering a summons to meet. Yahuwah's 7 micro-ey, 3 of which Dowd is seen responding to in his psalm, are invitations to be called out and welcomed into God's presence. One's response to them determines their future, even if they have one. This is particularly intriguing because Dowd is conveying both sides of Anna, to answer and respond, or be afflicted and persecuted. Said another way, Dowd's nepesh soul was afflicted on Chag Matsah so that those who reply and answer Yahuwah's invitations don't suffer the same fate. Having begun the 22nd Mizmowr at a defining moment in the second of 3 epochs of Dowd's prolonged existence, asking, my God, why, and then detailing his ordeal through Chag Matsah, the Messiah has turned his attention to Yahuwah. He realized that his Father will always be the impetus behind the restorative effects of these micro-ey, orchestrating every aspect for our benefit. Dowd wants to share the result of his soul and Yahuwah's spirit being reunited with us. Nor did he continually conceal his presence, while lo, Sathar Panahu, nor has he hidden his appearance, from him, Minhu. And, during, his request for help, Shoah, his pleading for relief and request for assistance in a desperate situation, to him, to he who is God, he listened, Shama, he heard. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 24. Dowd's oratory reveals that Yahowah was well aware of what would be occurring to his son's soul. And it is evident that they had discussed how this would all transpire. The perspective provided by Dowd's next line offers yet another affirmation that father and son developed a keen sense of mutual adoration. They were eager to compliment one another, both proud and impressed with what the other had accomplished. In so doing, they reveal what fulfilling Chag Matsah accomplished, while helping us better appreciate why Yahowah prefers to work through special people like Dowd rather than alone. Even God couldn't achieve this moment independently. And from Dowd's view, the son is singing his father's praises because he was grateful for what he was accomplishing on behalf of Yisrael. From you and because of you, Yada, I will be appreciated and adored for shining brightly, my reputation exalted, Tehillah, my song proclaiming my accomplishment and gratitude for this tremendous opportunity will elicit praise, feminine from halal, brightly shining and radiating light, construct, making it possessive, within the greatly esteemed assembly, Kahal Rab, among the abundant and exalted company, fulfilling my commitment and promise to be part of the free will. Offering, Neder, my vow. I am fulfilling restitution and complete restoration, Shalem, I am offering for enduring recompense and renewal, Peel imperfect first-person singular, in a conspicuous and straightforward fashion in the presence, neged, openly and in full view, of those who respect and admire it, YAHOWAH. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 25. Dowd fulfilled the means to our restitution with God, completely restoring the covenant relationship in a straightforward and conspicuous manner. It is the greatest of all gifts. Our King has earned the respect and adoration of God and every covenant member. And if they had not been so easily indoctrinated, the same would have been true of every Yisraelite and Yahud. So, while it was the greatest achievement in his life, it was Yahowah who made this possible. God combined Dowd's brilliant decision and courageous approach with his ability to achieve the grand reunification plan's purpose. The Messiah is revealing something we'd all be wise to consider. Having convinced God that he should be allowed to honor the most important promise ever made by enduring this excruciating trial during Chag Matsah as the sacrificial victim, Dowd is acknowledging that, while he will be adored for having done so, Yahowah deserves the credit. Without God, Dowd does not exist. Without Dowd, God is still God, just lonely. But beyond the obvious, had Yahowah been an absentee landlord, disengaging after creating the place and players, Dowd would not be worth knowing or remembering. Without Yahowah choosing, anointing, and inspiring him, he remains a shepherd, his great potential squandered in Bethlehem. It goes far deeper. Without Yahowah conceiving, articulating, and enabling the Berith and Micro in the Torah and then demonstrating their effectiveness in the lives of his people, Dowd's sacrifice would have been meaningless because it would not benefit anyone. Dowd was motivated by what he knew Yahowah had done and would accomplish through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim on behalf of the Berith. And he recognized that his father was capable of orchestrating the entire affair to justifiably reconcile his relationship with his people. Yahowah made it possible for Dowd to be great. And Dowd understood the opportunity God had presented, he accepted the conditions and benefited from the result. And now, because of what father and son have accomplished by working together, the same opportunity, conditions, and benefits are available to everyone else. From you, and because of you, Yada, there is an appreciation of what I've accomplished, my renown and reputation are adored, providing me the opportunity to serve while shining brightly, Tehillah, within the greatly exalted assembly, Kahal Rab, fulfilling my commitment and promise to be part of this free will offering, Neder, I am fulfilling restitution and complete restoration, Shalem, in a conspicuous and straightforward fashion in the presence, neged, of those who respect and admire it, YAHOWAH. This was easier said than done, making the expression especially cathartic. Dowd lived his life in awe of Yah, always appreciative of everything he had done for him. And over the past 3 days, they had been partners, working for the benefit of the covenant family. And yet, here it is, the whole of it, from Pesach to Bikurim, laid out in all of its excruciating detail. I can imagine that, upon first witnessing what would transpire, he might have initially wanted to turn away and hide, to deny what his eyes had seen, knowing what he would endure. But then, we have to deal with the fact that God facilitated all of this to save the people who would disrespect his beloved son. Humankind's response was particularly painful. It would be 2,000 years before Jews would go from depriving Dowd of the credit he is due, even denying the fulfillment of Chag Matsah, to finally coming to adore father and son for what they have done. Equally horrible, the world's most popular religion would rob the Messiah and Son of God of his adoration and respect by creating an avatar and turning him into a replacement God who hates Israel. In spite of this, Dowd has, nonetheless, taken us forward in time when the returning covenant family and the mortal remnant of Yisrael will celebrate the family reunion and homecoming. And we will all be appreciative of what Dowd and Yahowah accomplished during Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children to provide full recompense and complete restoration. Working together as father and son, they did these things in a prominent, forthright fashion, each on the right day, each in the right way, each in the right order, and did so at the crossroads of the world. And while those who revere the father respect what his son accomplished, I am curious as to why the object of respect in the concluding phrase is who, him rather than Adayu if referring to Yahowah. But if indicative of our newfound perspective on Dowd's heroics, why not any me? Therefore, the most elegant solution is to render who as it or this in reference to all we have read thus far regarding their collective fulfillment of Chag Matsah. The song's lyrics continue with prophetic echoes of what Shabuah and Towrah would bring. The unpretentious and straightforward who respond, Anah, the sincere who act by answering the call, from Anna, to answer, respond, and reply, shall be continually nourished, Akal, they shall always be fed, Kal imperfect, and genuinely satisfied with overwhelming provisions, Wasaba, and they will be content, all of their needs met, Kal imperfect. Those who seek him, inquiring about and accounting for him, Darashu, those who search for him while learning from him, Kal participle, will continually radiate Yahuwah's brilliant and clear light, Halal Yahuwah, they will become a visible source of Yahuwah's light, Peel imperfect third person masculine plural. Your essential persona and good judgment, Lebab Ada, your inner nature and individual essence, your thoughts, feelings, and decisions, your mind and heart, and thus your soul and consciousness, will live forever based upon this restoring witness, Chayala Ad, shall be eternally restored and preserved, revived and nurtured throughout time as a result of this eternal testimony, Kal perfect Joseph. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 26. This is one of my favorite statements, a promise I've etched on my heart. In this context, it is the synthesis of the Torah. It is the answer, the promise, the purpose, the means, and the reward. And to my mind, it addresses how Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim result in Shabuah. It is then that the Ruach abundantly enriches, empowers, and enlightens the covenant's children so that we can effectively Teruah by producing the final gleaning. When this occurs, a meaningful remnant of Yisrael and Yehudim will come back home to Jerusalem to celebrate the return of father and son during Kippurim. This leads to happily ever after as we re-enter the garden of great joy to camp out with our family on Sukkah. The final 4 lines of the 3,000-year-old prophetic psalm reveal that Dowd knew that evil men would brutalize his soul in the manner he had detailed 10 centuries before he honored his promise. His example defines love. It proclaims that, ultimately, his people will recognize his sacrifice and turn to Yahuwah because he has done this. There is nothing more important at this time than reminding Yehudim why they ought to return to Yahuwah before it is too late. They will continually remember, Zakar, they will recall and will be mindful, Kal imperfect, and then they will return, Washub, they will turn around and think differently, re-establishing relations, renewed and restored by turning, to, El, Yahowah, Yahowah, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his Haya, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, everyone to the extremities of the land and earth, Kol, Fs, Eretz, all. Finally without ceasing to the far extent of the material realm. And, they will settle down and camp out, while making this announcement on their own initiative, Chawa, they will verbally explain this without being pressured to do so, continually conveying their decision using words, announcing this without outside influence while camping out for a prolonged period, a staffel, reflexive of the hip peel, imperfect, approaching your appearance, Lapana Ada, upon your presence, all people and ethnicities, Kol Mishpacha Gawim, every member of the extended family and race, including non-Yisraelites. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 27. We began the 22nd Mizmowr Azab separated from Yahuwah and near death, and now, we find ourselves camping out with him forevermore. We have moved through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, enabling Shabuah and Teruah to facilitate Kippurim such that we are celebrating Sukkah. In this way, Chawa is a full-service verb, addressing everything from settling down and camping out to making our choice to live with Yahuwah known. It is reassuring that God's campers are gathered prior to his appearance. Our mission is to ensure that father and son are pleased with the reception they receive. It is also affirming of our experience that every member of the covenant family will be there, including some very special and beloved Gawim. Be aware, no one is remembering or acknowledging he whose name is never spoken, I/Jesus. The counterfeit didn't accomplish any of this. He did not exist, and he isn't coming back. Jesus Christ is a figment of religious imaginations. He is a lousy replacement for Dowd, and he is the product of philology. Curious as to the set of circumstances whereby everyone on earth would be making this announcement before Yahuwah, I found the answers provided in the text. Those included in this group are Zakar mindful of Yahuwah and particularly aware of his most memorable man. And on this limited occasion, the transition from Teruah to Kippurim, it is Yada who will have laid down his life so that Yisrael might not only live, but also prepare them to exist in the presence of their God and King. In addition, every member of this mortal remnant will have changed his thinking about father and son and returned home. They have arrived in advance of God's return to Chawa make this announcement on their own initiative, ready to camp out because they know who is coming and why. Also, Mishpacha, as a compound of mai, to question, and shapa, to have scraped by when others were blown away by the wind, reveals that these are the few among the many. They are well on their way to becoming Mishpacha family and, thus, ultimately, covenant. Because indeed, KY, for the express reason, on behalf of La, during the approach of Yahuwah, Yahuwah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our Shalom, restoration, the king reigns, Maluka, there is rulership and royalty, from Malak, to become king and reign by providing advice and counsel, providing leadership by painting pictures with words, Wamashal, taking charge through effective communication, making informative and revealing comparisons with proverbs and parables, governing through wise discourse, Kal participle, with, BA, people from different races and places, Gawim, different ethnicities. Mizmowr/song/Psalm 22 verse 28. The opening lines of this song were focused on Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach. As we near its conclusion, we are celebrating Sukkah. But more than this, Yahuwah has answered a question that, until this moment, I've never understood: why would anyone living in Yahuwah's presence need a king? The answer is twofold, and initially, it is found in both Malak and Mashal. Dowd leads through effective communication and governs through wise discourse, ever ready to paint pictures with words by providing wise counsel and good advice. No one has been as gifted in this regard as the author of these lyrics. Secondarily, since YAHOWAH's preference is to work together with his sons and daughters, just as he has and will continue to do throughout the mode YYV3C6, he found the ideal man to guide us through eternity. And clearly, he deserves our respect. And just as there is one God, there is one firstborn, one Messiah, and one King. And that is why he reigns on behalf of YAHOWAH. Rather than return to the Shabat judges, in the covenant family, the best and brightest among us will provide proverbs and parables to lead and guide us. More than this, heaven isn't a democracy. For reasons that were important to him, YAHOWAH chose Dowd. It is his universe and his home, and therefore, his decision. He authorized Dowd by anointing him Messiah and inspired him with his spirit. They wrote these lyrics together. This way, we are afforded a choice, we can join them on these conditions, knowing that Dowd will be our shepherd, or we can go our separate ways. Over the past 3,000 years, Yisrael has chosen the latter, that is, until YAHOWAH expressed his will again, choosing someone to give voice to his son's message to mankind. One last thought before we move on. The conclusion of the last statement reveals that Goyim non-Yisraelites will be providing leadership and counsel along with Dowd. This means there are Gentiles that the king will find useful or at least entertaining. Therefore, Dowd will be assembling a racially diverse team to work with him. Smart managers delegate, and there are none wiser than God's son. With Dowd singing to us every evening, the children of the covenant will gather around the campfire and be regaled by his stories. Listen. Olive, Kol, the anointed, Dashan, the chosen harvest, the accepted and satisfied, the empowered and content, the prosperous and enriched, the vigorous who are now thriving, of the land and earth, Eretz, of the material realm, who approach his presence, Lapanahu, at his appearance, shall be nourished, Akal, they will be fed, Kal perfect, and they will settle down living in shelters while independently making their position known, Wachaya, they shall tabernacle, reminiscent of. Sukkah, shelters where we camp out with God, while they make public pronouncements and explain, using words, what matters most to the living, Astafel/Hitpeel imperfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 29, JPS 2230, in part. This is yet another affirmation that we should be following Dowd's example. He is showing us the way home. Just as he was anointed 3 times, symbolic of his 3 lives here on earth, YAHOWAH will be anointing every member of his covenant family. And as a result, we will all be, Dashan, among the chosen for the harvest, accepted and satisfied, richly empowered and totally content. Over these last few stanzas of this glorious song, YAHOWAH has stated that his provision satisfies, that those who rely upon his bread will be nourished, and that they will be healthy and prosperous, lacking nothing. He has also said that those who change their thinking and attitude toward him will be restored. The mortal remnant of the children of Yisrael are now Chaya living in Sukkah shelters, camping out with our Heavenly Father during the millennial celebration of the Sabbath. The Mikrah of Sukkah, the invitation to be called out and meet with God, is a time of wondrous Chawah pronouncements as we proclaim what it means to us individually to have been afforded this opportunity. These insights are provided by Chawah, which most English Bibles wrongly render as bowing down, prostrating oneself in worship. Even outside of the context of YAHOWAH's return, and living in his presence, there is very little etymological support for that rendering. At best, it is listed 5th among 4 considerably more valid definitions in most Hebrew dictionaries. And some lexicons don't even include bowing or worshipping among Chawah's connotations. The primary meaning of Chawah is to tell, to explain, to announce something publicly, to verbally convey an important statement using words, and to inform making a declaration. The secondary definition for Chawah speaks of settling down and living in shelters while making our positions known as we celebrate tabernacles. In this context, a Chawah is a settlement, a place people camp out, and an encampment where they tabernacle together. This idea of living collectively is further reinforced by Chawah, the name Adam gave to his wife. It reveals that she spoke her mind while camping out in the garden. And while her proclamations got herself and Adam expelled from Eden, coming full circle, it is ours which will allow us back in. That is not to say that people won't bow down before God. Many will. And this realization brings us to the second half of the 30th statement. For the earth to become like Eden, it will have to be cleansed. As part of this process, we read. Those who are habitually kneeling down, prostrating themselves, having made life miserable, Kara, those who are continually bowing down on their knees, Kal imperfect third person masculine plural, will all descend, going down, Kol Yared, those bowing down will all be abandoned and lowered, brought down, Kal participle, to the dust of the earth, afar, to the ground, toward the powdery ash and dirt, to the rubbish and rubble of the material realm, even, Wa, the soul itself, nepesh hu. His consciousness. He will not be allowed to live, lo, Chaya, he will not be kept alive, restored to life, revived from death, nor spared, saved, or preserved, Peel perfect third person masculine singular. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 29. As we have shared throughout Yada Yahowah, there are 3 different fates awaiting human souls. Those who have embraced the terms and conditions of YAHOWAH's covenant will camp out with God, learning from him and sharing with him. Those souls who ignore his covenant, even reject his covenant, will cease to exist. They will not be kept alive nor be restored to life. For them, it is dust to dust and ashes to ashes. There will be neither reward nor penalty. Suffering a debilitating fate, those souls who have led others astray, those who have advanced the cause of religion and politics, who have sought to replace YAHOWAH's covenant and people, will descend to Sheol to experience an eternity of emotional anguish, separated from God. The verdict in the latter 2 cases will be determined during the millennial Sabbath of shelters. Every soul estranged from YAHOWAH will be judged, with some bowing down before God to receive their disposition. Therefore, for a Muslim or Catholic constantly bowing and prostrating oneself in religious worship, a day will come when they will kneel in judgment. And on that day of judgment, the best available alternative will be for their soul to be extinguished. As such, this verse is further proof that souls are mortal. Immortality requires being born anew in Yahuwah's spirit or aligning oneself with Satan's spirit and leading others astray. It is a subtle and profound truth. Those who prostrate themselves in religious worship have made life miserable for themselves and others, particularly God's people. And so, it is the religious who are being sent down. The faithful will find their beliefs deadly. Dowd, speaking of his God and Savior, concludes his song by singing that we will be like the Messiah in two additional ways. We are afforded the opportunity of working with Yah and proclaiming his message. Posterity, Zerah, the seed which is sown, the descendants, children, and offspring, shall work with him, Abad who will act, serve, and labor with him, expending considerable energy and intensity to do things with him, Kalin perfect. This will be recounted, recorded, and proclaimed, Sapar, it will be regarded and told, conveying the full and accurate measure of the scroll in writing, Puel and perfect, of the approach, law, of the drawing near, of my upright one, Idown, any, the upright pillar of my tabernacle, to, law, on behalf of, the generations and their dwelling places, Ha-Dower, those related by birth, the family line, the household and home. Mizmowr 22:30. They will come, bow, they will arrive, always be included, and continually approach, Kalin perfect, while, Wah, conspicuously announcing, exposing and declaring, Nagad, explaining and manifesting, informing and reporting, publicly announcing and expounding upon, Hyphal imperfect, he was right, vindicating, and acquitting, Tzedakah who, he is correct, fair, and honest, a righteous and truthful Savior, doing so on behalf of the family members, La Am, with regard to and when approaching. The people who are related, who have been and will be born, Yalad, who are their descendants and children, such that they honestly acknowledge, KY, surely and truly, he has engaged and acted to actually accomplish this, Asa, he has done this job, genuinely performing this work at this moment in time, Kal perfect. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 31. Based upon all we have read, what was done, and who accomplished it, I think that this is Yahuwah addressing how the covenant family will respond to his beloved Son. The Messiah, now the upright pillar of Yahuwah's tabernacle as a result of fulfilling Passover, will be recounted for having done so by the generations living during the prolonged celebration of Sukkah. The children of the covenant will realize and acknowledge, he was right and is, as a result, vindicating. If not for him, none of us would be here. I adore the concluding line, he engaged to accomplish this. He performed, honoring the promises by fulfilling the mission. Therefore, more than anyone else in his story, Yahuwah affirms that Dowd was tzaddik right. When it comes to being part of the covenant family and entering heaven, nothing is more important. I do not know how anyone can read this Mizmowr/Psalm and not be moved to conviction, to action. Prophecy doesn't get any more relevant or personal than this. No words sing more beautifully or more clearly. Dowd predicted his role in the single greatest act in human history, the vindication of Yisrael and the covenant family. He committed it to writing 1,000 years before he fulfilled it so that, when it happened, we would know what he had accomplished. His reasons were brilliant and complex, compassionate and justifiable. His sacrifice and heroism were beyond compare. There is no greater life. There is no other path to life. In all of the words conveyed by the prophets, there are none more poignant, palpable, or personal than these. I suspect that even his father is moved to tears by what his son chose to accomplish on our behalf. To the glorious director and everlasting guide, Lahanatsak, according to the leadership of the ram, the lamb opening the doorway, leaping like the buck, Alth, of the dawn, Hashakar. A song, Mizmowr, of, La, Dowd, Dowd. Mizmowr 22 dedication. My God, Eli, why, Lama, have you in this moment forsaken me, Azab Eni? Far, Rachok, away from, Min, my liberation and deliverance, Yeshua Eni, are the words, Dabri, of my anguished groaning, Shaga Eni. Mizmowr 22:1. My God, Elohim Eni, I am appointed to call out and continually proclaim the summons and to make the invitations known, Kara, this day, Yomam, but, Wah, you do not answer, Lo, Anna, so, Wah, by night, in the absence of the light in the darkness, Layla, there is no relief for me, no expectation of rest or silence, Wallo, Dumyala Eni. Mizmowr 22:2. You are set apart, Wah, Ada Kodesh, living to establish, Yashab, the renown and reputation, Tehillah, of Yisrael, Yisrael. Mizmowr 22:3. In you, Ba, Ada, our fathers, of Anaknu, relied, Batach. They trusted, Batach, and, Wah, you continually rescued them, Palathem. Mizmowr 22:4. To you, El, Ada, to you, they cried out for help, Zaaq, and they were delivered, Wah Malat. In you, Ba, Ada, they trusted and relied, Batach, and they were not disappointed or disapproved, Wah Lo, Bausch. Mizmowr 22:5. I am but, Wah Enki, a crimson grub, Watola, no longer extant or present as a person, being less than human, Wah Lo Aish, rebuked and taunted, insulted and dishonored, Chirpa, by humankind, Adam, and disrespected and demeaned, Baza, by the people, Am. Mizmowr 22:6. All of those who see me, Kol Area Eni, they deride and mock me, speaking unintelligibly about me, disparaging me, Laiji La Eni. They shoot off their mouths, Pater Ba Safa, while they shake their heads, Nuwa Rosh. Mizmowr 22:7. You have chosen to be removed and sent away to Yahuwah, Galil El Yahuwah. So, let's see if he wants to rescue him, Palathu. Let him choose to deliver and save him, Natsalhu. Surely, KY, he desires to be with him, Chafez Bahu. Mizmowr 22:8. Indeed, you, Ada, had me to gush forth and thrash about, in normal childbirth from, Jayak any min, the womb, beten, causing me to rely, batach any, upon, my mother's breasts, shed any. Mizmowr 22:9. Before you, Ada, I was cast out of, shalak min, the point of origin as an act of compassion and love, rekhem. From, min, the womb, biten, of my mother, any, you are, Ada, my God, any. Mizmowr 22:10. Do not continually distance yourself from me by allowing your relationship with me to be severed for a prolonged period, rachak min any, because, the oppressive confinement and adversary's anguish, Sarah, is imminent and personal, Carol. And yet, no one, can help, Azar. Mizmowr 22:11. Numerous, fiercely aggressive soldiers and powerful warriors, these bullish beasts, of the aggressively attacking supernatural, serpent, Bashan, surround me, Sabab any. They have besieged and crowned me in a hostile fashion, gathering around to hem me in, threatening me, Cathart any. Mizmowr 22:12. They open, Patsa, their mouths, Pehem, against me, any, like a fearsome beast, mangling and tearing me to pieces as a violent and abhorrent, especially repugnant, way to die, Tariff, while roaring loudly, Shaiji. Mizmowr 22:13. As it pertains to bodily fluids, Maim, I am poured out and weakened, Shapak. And, olive, coal, my most substantial bones, Etzem any, are stretched, separated, and out of joint, Parad. My heart is now, Leb any haya, like wax, Downag. It has melted, wasting away along with, Massas ba talk any, my internal organs, Mia any. Mizmowr 22:14. Like sun-baked dust, a broken earthen vessel, shares, my vigor and strength, coach any, are withered and failed, Yabesh. And, my tongue, Lashon any, cleaves, Dabak, to the roof of my mouth, Malcoach any. So, approaching, the dust, afar, of death, this plague, moth, they have placed me, validating why I'm here, Shapath. Mizmowr 22:15. For indeed, the contemptible scum and abased yelpers, Caleb, have surrounded me, Nakaf any. A politicized religious community providing the testimony, Ada, of the disastrously corrupt and injurious, RAA, establishes a destructive annual cycle to denigrate what I'm doing, Nakaf any. They bore into and have pierced, Karo, my hands, Yad, and my feet, Regal any. Mizmowr 22:16. I can count, Sapar, all, Kol, my bones, Etzamoth. They, themselves, stare as they look right through me, Nabat Raba any. Mizmowr 22:17, they divide and plunder then distribute, Chalak, my garments, begged any, among themselves, Lahem, and, for, my clothing, Labush any, they cast lots, Naphal Gaurul. Mizmowr 22:18. But you, Ada, Yahowah, you will not be far away for a protracted period, lo, Rachak. My Ialoth, my source of strength and assistance, the fortitude and ability of the ram opening the doorway, Ialoth any, it is my desire and your decision, my choice and your will to act quickly, hastening the process, rapidly rushing in with the minimum passage of time, Chush, to assist in my rescue by supporting me, La, Ezra any. Mizmowr 22:19. It is my desire and your will, my choice and yours, to deliver my soul, to snatch away and save my soul, Natsau Nepesh any, from the horror, heat, desolation, and ruin, Min Choreb, my unique position as son and precious life as the firstborn child, Yakid any, from the influence, Min Yad, of the contemptible scum and abased yelpers, Caleb. Mizmowr 22:20. You want to liberate and save me, to rescue and deliver me, Yasha any, out of, Min, the mouth, Peh, of the fearsome and destructive beast, Aryeh. And from, Min, the horns of the bull representing the flashing light that has been lifted up on high, Karen Ram, you have answered me during my affliction, Anna any. Or. And so, from, Min, the brilliant light of this summit which lifts on high, Karen Rame, you have answered me during my affliction, Anna any. Mizmowr 22:21. I have chosen to continually recount, providing a written record, Sapar, of your name, Shem, Ada, to my brethren, La Ach any, within the midst of, Ba talk, the summoned community who have been called out, Kahal, so as to radiate your brilliant source of enlightenment and brag about you, Halal, Ada. Mizmowr 22:22. Respect and revere, Yahowah, to radiate his light, Halalhu. Every, Kol, descendant, Zerah, of Yaakov, you should choose to consider him worthy of respect and massively significant, Kabadhu. You should want to live with him, Wagur Minhu, all you descendants of Yisrael, Min Kol Zerah, Yisrael. Mizmowr 22:23. Indeed, he has not relinquished his regard for or thought less of, Lo, Baza, nor has he rejected, Lo, Shakats, the responsive one who is afflicted and oppressed, Inuf any. Mizmowr 22:24. Nor did he continually conceal his presence, Lo, Sathar Panahu, from him, Minhu. And, during, Ba, his request for help, Shoah, who, to him, Elhu, he listened, Shama. From you and because of you, Min, Ada, I will be appreciated and adored for shining brightly, my reputation exalted, Tehillah any, within the greatly esteemed assembly, Ba Kahal Rab, fulfilling my commitment and promise to be part of the freewill offering, Neder any. I am fulfilling restitution and complete restoration, Shalem, in a conspicuous and straightforward fashion in the presence, Neged, of those who respect and admire this, Yar, who. Mizmowr 22:25. The unpretentious and straightforward who respond, Anah, will be continually nourished, Akal, and genuinely satisfied with overwhelming provisions, Wasaba. Those who seek him, inquiring about and accounting for him, Darashu, will continually radiate Yahuwah's brilliant and clear light, Halal Yahuwah. Your essential persona and good judgment, Lebab Ada, will live forever based upon this restoring witness, Chayallah Ad. Mizmowr 22:26. They will continually remember, Zakar, and then they will return, Washub, to El, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, everyone to the far extremities of the land and earth, Kol, F's, Eretz. And, they will settle down and camp out, while making this announcement on their own initiative, Chawa, approaching your appearance, Lapana Ada, all people and ethnicities, Kol Mishpachagawim. Mizmowr 22:27. Because indeed, KY, on behalf of La, Yahowah, Yahuwah, the king reigns, offering advice and counsel, Maluka, providing leadership by painting pictures with words, governing through wise discourse, Wamashal, with BA, people from different races and places, Gawim. Mizmowr 22:28. All of, Kol, the anointed chosen for the harvest, the accepted and empowered, Dashan, of the land and earth, Eretz, who approach his presence, Lapanahu, will be nourished, Akal, and they will settle down living in shelters while independently making their position known, Wachaya. Those who are habitually kneeling down, prostrating themselves, having made life miserable, Kara, will all descend, going down, Kol Yered, to the dust of the earth, afar, even, the soul itself, Nepeshu. He will not be allowed to live nor be restored to life, Lo, Chaya. Mizmowr 22:29. Posterity, Zerah, shall work with him, Abadhu. This will be recounted, recorded, and proclaimed, Saphar, of the approach, La, of the upright pillar of my tabernacle, Idown Eni, to, La, the generations and their dwelling places, Ha-Dower. Mizmowr 22:30. They will come, bow, while, conspicuously announcing, exposing and declaring, Nagad, he was right, vindicating, and acquitting, a righteous Savior, Tzedakahu, doing so on behalf of the family members, who have been and will be born, Yalad, such that they honestly acknowledge, he has engaged and acted to actually accomplish this, Asa. Mizmowr/Song/Psalm 22 verse 31. His was the most valuable and costly gift ever offered. And it is the least recognized and appreciated. Yod Hey Wah Hey.